welcome to Chronic Curiosity. Thanks you for joining us today. We have all the things that are chronically curious on the website, chronic-curiosity.com. Check it out. All the links are there to watch and listen to the show. There is also a new store up, which has some t-shirts in it. You can get you one of these bad boys, the Schrodinger's Curiosity. If you're not seeing this, make sure you go on the website, check it out. These shirts are super comfortable. It's not just a shirt. These are some of my favorite t-shirts, and I've finally found a place that gets me what I want, how I want it, in a shirt that's just comfortable. So if you want to support the show, we'd appreciate it. There's a couple neat little designs on there that are curious, to say the least. And there's also a form on the website. If you have questions, comments, want to contact us, please do so. Sign up, chit chat, do the things, whatever. We enjoy the interaction. So we hope you enjoy this episode.
Give these guys a sticker.
Yeah, so but they're coming, and I'll make sure to get you guys some.
I like your logo.
You don't have to.
Cool.
Yeah, and I also
We're getting paid in beer, so.
Oh, well, they're also.
I want to order one though.
They're up on the website. So I have finally gotten there. Have a couple of different designs that we got going. So cool. You guys all ready? Make sure we get those.
My hair?
Yeah.
Like this close?
Yeah.
Or like,
oh yeah.
I gotta be that
beautiful.
close?
Yeah. You can move that around.
You got
too,
the condenser, baby.
Yeah. So
This should be good.
beautiful.
All right.
We ready? Doing it?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, I won't forget. Usually, I forget to actually introduce the people when we start.
I usually remind you.
Yeah, we usually do what we
No,
just
do
did,
that
and
in
then we
post.
just forget. So we got Rick,
Dan.
Dan, and Darren. I was trying to not Darren.
It's okay.
Darren,
Switch
Switch
before.
places.
Rick, Dan, and Darren. Invisible Ships podcast, fantastic. It seems to be such a. My mind goes to an interesting story. How you guys got started, like how you guys got to where you're at now. I'm sure we'll get into the what you guys just got kind of not necessarily done doing, but I'm just really curious as to what made you start it, and what was kind of like your aim to like the evolution of where you ended up where you're at now. Because even listening to your guys' show, it seems like throughout the episodes it was like, oh, we didn't expect this to happen.
Yeah.
And then it was like, here you are.
Yes.
So like, what's that? Because
That was a crazy ride. So it started out in the beginning of the COVID lockdown where everything started sucking, right? And you couldn't do anything. That my brother and I were like, let's just do like a YouTube show or a podcast, and we'll just talk about the shit we talk about when we go camping. So we like to like sit around campfire and tell each other like crazy ghost stories, UFOs,
Bigfoot, all that good
missing
stuff.
person, stuff like that. So, we had no experience whatever. So I just went on I got my tax return and I ordered some podcasting equipment, and we did our first one about the drones over Colorado, and we had no idea what we're doing. So we're plugging away
It's a weird one.
at doing these just like UFO stuff and things like that, which is really fun to do. But
We had the most unpopular podcast episode of all time.
yes,
The
Moke Manembe.
we can't even say. There's supposedly in the Congo Republic,
So the dinosaur.
the dinosaur
Yes.
in Africa.
Oh,
Have you ever
yeah,
seen the movie Baby?
Yeah. Well, I remember seeing that when I was a kid.
Great
Yeah.
movie.
And there was that dude on Joe Rogan that he was an
I love that.
Asian guy, and he went out there to try and
Oh,
find
yeah,
that thing. Did you-
who? Oh, I forget.
dude, that dude's wild.
But dude,
I think about that before.
people
Yeah.
hated that episode. We actually got hate mail.
How'd you get hate? You
don't
got hate
know.
mail for it? Like, what were they pissed off about?
We didn't even have
I
a
think the
hard
lack
stance.
of effort. We did a really bad job.
We didn't even take a hard stance. We're like, this thing might exist. There's some folklore and blah blah, and it might not exist because does a dinosaur?
No, we don't
still
want
exist?
to.
But,
We don't want to crash your
people
ratings.
just-
We shouldn't talk about
People
it.
were
it's fine.
pissed,
But,
but it's we got more thumbs down than anything on that, and so that was like
But that was kind of a turning point because it's
Well-
we're just sitting here reading Wikipedia articles and it's not working. People are hating it. And, we should be creating our own content. And then
well, Darren, our brother-in-law, has always been interested in the Brian Macron case, which is a crazy unsolved case that happened like in our own backyard. So he's always telling me that we should cover this, and my wife was always like, "No, don't do this to me."
Well, why? It's
in
always
this
the
town.
reasonable ones, right?
Yeah. Well, like our kids like had classes with the Macron's children. Like my daughter played lacrosse with the Macron daughter and stuff. So I mean, like we had to be very careful about doing something like that. It's like where you don't shit where you eat or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
did.
Well, we decided to anyways, you know. But well, I listened to Johnny Gosh from you guys.
Yeah.
Because the first ones, it was like, oh yeah, it's nice you guys are podcasting, but I'm not following yet. But
said
then
you loved
John, I like Johnny Gosh.
Love-
Johnny Gosh, I like. All right, this has potential, and so I was like, guys, if we're gonna do this, we need to do Macron next. And Rick's hard to get on board sometimes, you know. So sometimes you really have to, you know, kind of push Rick. Well, finally, I was able to coax him into like taking his inflatable kayaks over to Chippewa Lake, and I work in like home care, so I'm in people's houses every day, and you know, so I'm in Chippewa Lake all the time. So I mean, I had a lot of different people I talked to that felt very strongly that there was foul play, and it just ended so, like it was like the biggest disappointment to like the news. The end, it was like, you know, I think he acted alone, and then that was it. You know, but so everything was like folklore after that, you know, all these rumors and everything. So I was like, if we can just summarize the articles, maybe I can get somebody that I talk to on here or whatnot. And then it just exploded.
Yeah. Well, you reached out to the private investigator. So the Macron family hired their own PI. His name is Paul Hartman. He's a former federal mail inspector, postal inspector.
Yeah.
And we didn't think that they were going to talk to us, but he got back to Darren. He said that he would talk on the condition that Victoria Macron could talk too. So we're like, yeah, let's, you know, we have no idea what we're doing, but let's do an interview. So we thought we were going to get like 30 minutes with them. And we ended up being in my bedroom, which is our studio, recording for like
Not
4.5 hours. You know what I mean? It was like 4.5 hours, and they were telling us like every couple sentences was something that was like blowing our minds. Like we had no idea this stuff was hidden from the media and stuff. And we put it out there, and the craziest and the coolest thing that makes me glad for all the trouble and everything was that people just started contacting us. That like she's talking about how they repainted the crime scene within a matter of hours, and then the painter's calling.
Right. So before you get into the details,
Okay.
Give everybody just a rough. Obviously, if you want to hear the story from these guys, you know, go check their podcast out because it's, like you said, it's pretty incredible. And everybody, because I had a buddy that turned me on. He just said, "Hey man, have you heard about this or you know about this thing?" I was like, no, I don't know. He's like, "There's a podcast these guys are doing. Check it out. It's a crazy story." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I was listening to so much stuff at that time. I was like, "All right, what am I going to try to fit this in?" But I started listening to it, and it was like, the first episode's like, whoa, like, fucking really? It's like, that's really odd. But then I'm like, how do these guys do so many episodes on this? And then you get to the next episode and you're like, what? No way. And then the next episode, it's like more stuff. Like, so just a brief kind of, what is it? And like, you know, kind of a summary of kind of what happened. And then, you know, how you guys kind of fit into that puzzle.
So, Brian Macron is the gentleman who was killed in 2015. But so basically he was a township trustee.
What was it, 2016? December.
Oh, yeah, 16. I'm sorry. So December 15th of 2016, he went missing under suspicious circumstances. They found blood in his office, and they later located his car just like 2 miles away at Chippewa Lake, which is a fairly highly residential area. And then he was gone. They didn't know where he went. Nothing really came about for the next 2 months. And then it was a warm spell in February. So February 21st, he was found floating in the lake. When they pulled him out, he had 6 stab wounds, and there was no water in his lungs.
Suspicious.
Yeah. And then in June, basically, just kind of like going through the real brief story, they released the autopsy and basically said that he acted alone, and that's pretty much where it sat. They turned it over to BCI. BCI was doing an investigation all the way up until October of 2020, when the prosecutor closed the case, and then that's kind of, and so we started the
right in the middle
podcast.
of our podcast.
Right.
Yeah, in September was our first one, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
How did they end up closing the case? Like, what did they say?
So this was like, you know what, like I don't want to apply too much motive, but this was at the time when the prosecutor was running for re-election, right? It was like, you know, the October surprise. Like this was a couple, like maybe a week or two before Halloween. So like really close to election day. And he started putting out on Instagram, which I follow him on Instagram, that you reelect me and I'm going to look into these cold cases. I'm going to form a cold case task force and stuff. And so we're thinking like, he's talking about Macron. Like
There was rumors. There's indictments were coming.
Yeah.
Like we were hearing a lot of like chatter.
I think that the show picked up like way more people than I thought were going to listen to it. And like they started together collectively, like having a voice and like causing the politicians to take notice. I really believe that. But he decided to close the case, which was a good thing because then we could FOIA like all the documents. And when we started going through the documents, we found out that there was a lot of conflicting information from what the authorities and the investigators were stating as fact to what was actually in the report. And man, the more you look at this, the weirder it gets. And we're called conspiracy theorists by like the Akron Beacon Journal and most of the local media, but we're really not compared to a lot of the people that we talk to. But when you start seeing this stuff, it's like, all right, so why would they not tell the truth? Why would they purposely mislead us? Like,
Well, yeah,
how
and
many
that's-
people can be involved?
That's the whole thing, and they call us amateur sleuths. But it's the whole reason we talked about this is when it happened, because we're in Medina County, right? So we're like, this is crazy. Have you heard about this? I'm sure they're gonna figure out what happened, and it's like, oh no, it was suicide, and like we never bought it. And then no one did anything about it. Like there was not another podcast about it, and there's not like that should be a Netflix show or something. Like it's an unsolved thing.
Right. Well, I mean, that was the main, not necessarily the main point, but one of the reasons I reached out was like realizing after I kind of gotten through most of it and just obviously not nowhere near in depth as you guys know about it, but it was like, oh, like this is still open. Like this is still a thing. And after you listen, even the first couple episodes, you're like, these are all really, really weird things. And if someone's making a podcast about it and putting it out there, like they have to be really ballsy just to like lie about all this stuff. You know what I mean? Because someone's going to call you out on it. And as many people know about it, it's like, well, what the hell's going on here? And then you get through the whole story up until now. It's like, there's so many weird loose ends and just things that the more questions you ask, the more questions you have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of faith to believe the official narrative.
Yeah.
It does. You got to put yourself out there on a limb and swallow something to really feel like it went down the way that they said it went down.
There's no way it went down the way they said it went down.
That's what I was going to ask. When you said a lot of faith, I was going to say, was that after the kind of some of the documents were released, or when you said faith, like just there's no way, like you
Yeah,
said?
I mean,
so
like-
you answered my question.
You know, there's
way.
two camps, right? You know, there's a camp that we're not anti-police. I should say that. Like, there's some people that attack us. You know, they're like, I back the blue, so they've never made a mistake. That's a fallacy.
That's
you know what I mean?
foolish.
Like,
Yeah.
I want the cops to do their job. I want them to catch the bad guys, and I don't want them to, harass people that are innocent. But you got to hold your public officials accountable. And so, like, this was a shitty job. They did a bad job. They threw away evidence from the crime scene. Like, we talk about this was a stabbing, right? Or a major bloodletting event. And we got all these reports of cops throwing away knives. And so we started talking about that. Then we got the BCR report, and there's actual, like, in the BCR report, they're like, oh, yeah, we found a knife at the crime scene, but we're not sure what happened to it. We think
bloody
that,
towel.
I think
with
someone
DNA
threw it
we
away.
can't identify.
Like,
That's the biggest thing. Like, oh, we think someone just threw this stuff
Yeah.
away.
so I'm
Like,
like,
what? What
How
do
the
you
hell did
mean?
this get a report? How did that, like the desk sergeant or whatever, not like flip out on that guy submitting that on his desk?
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to be able to say that, like, oh, well, yeah, nonchalantly, like, yeah, we think we think we lost it.
I mean, I'm not a cop, but I think in the police academy, whatever, they teach you, like, if you find evidence, don't throw it away.
or something that possibly,
Yeah, even
could
possibly
solve
could
the
be
case.
evidence.
You
or
go to a
lead to-
scene where it looks like somebody was stabbed, and you find a knife, that could be important.
That could Well, I think to your point, like, I'm a we've had police officers on the show. I back the blue, and you want the police to catch the bad guys, but at the same time, like, we don't want the police to be the bad guys.
I back people doing their damn job.
Right.
Too.
Right, exactly. It's like it's not a binary thing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
If
you can be for
anything-
the cops when they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, what we want them to be doing, and then you could be like, "Hey, I'm going to criticize this."
And if anything, we're not saying there was like a crooked cop. It's probably just a systemic, like, I think one of the big things was they kind of took the crime scene and then gave it to the BCI and said, start over from the things we gave you. So the BCI is starting with kind of like a stacked deck. So they're going to just reach the same conclusion because they were kind of led that way. So it's almost not even their fault. Like, I don't know what we would really wish to happen. Like, maybe have like an independent like investigator come in and do the thing all the way over. Because they're just, I mean, the official closing of it is what? Undetermined?
Undetermined autopsy, yeah. I disagree. I think there's some serious issues going on, and I hope that there's enough good people to see it and find some resolutions here. But I back the blue too. I am totally on for backing the blue, but I'm almost like we need to back them more. We need to get them more training. We need to get better investigation. How do you become a detective? It's just if you're there long enough, you can apply
You
for
get a
it.
promotion.
It's not that you actually completed some rigorous ability to collect evidence. I mean, my brother went to sell a 4-wheeler up in Cleveland, and he was stupid, and the guy said, let me take it for a test drive. This is my house. It wasn't his house. Went away, calls the cop. Cop shows up and says, it's gone. It's like, well, I didn't need to call the police to know that it's gone. He drove off with it,
Investigated.
I mean, come on, man.
I was here for it. Yeah.
Come on. He didn't even go. I mean, like, at least give him like the courtesy and like drive in that direction that he went. No, just filled it out. Said, if it shows up, we'll call you. Right. I mean, that doesn't do anybody any good. I mean, not that you need to go search every quad or anything, but I mean, that's what it was like with Macron too. It's like, he went to California. Ah, shit. He showed up in the lake. Killed himself. You know what I mean? Like, that's what happened.
Yeah, so I guess that's, from my understanding, and correct me on any of this stuff if I'm wrong, but just to kind of summarize some things. So he goes missing. There was a lot of funny things when he went missing around. It seemed funny with the trustees and the police department that they were just either completely inept or whatever, something. So there's, some issues with the way everything was handled through the entire process, whether it be evidence or just the way people handled themselves seemed really weird. And then there's a lot of additional things that as the story goes on that we find out that, there's a lot of things that tied into this potentially. And there's a lot of people involved.
Mm-hmm.
I know at one point I saw an article that, there was someone made a statement. I can't remember if it was one of the trustees or somebody kind of involved closely with the case, saying that like, it seemed like they felt kind of vilified.
Yes.
And it was like, all right, I get that, but man, if everything else is, how it sounds like it went, like you were being kind of weird too. So like, there's just so many things that you go, all right, this, like the police officer's not necessarily doing their job, or whatever it is. Like they might have had nothing to do with it, but just the lackadaisical way they handled it, like it doesn't look good.
There's a whole website against our podcast, which is a weird thing to have happen to your podcast.
Well, when you start getting called out and people start, and I'll give them at that same time too. There's a lot of people out there, that are conspiracy theorists and listen to this stuff. And when you're just speculating, they can take things and run with them and get real crazy because there's some real crazy people out there. You know what I mean? So
I think you probably agree that we were pretty careful. Like we didn't go off half-cocked, and we never accused anyone.
Right.
Like we just were asking questions, and so one question led to another. And the weirdest thing about covering this thing, it's like a quantum experiment. Like as you're observing it, you're causing it to change. And like,
ooh,
dude, that's what made it so hard. Like
I like this guy.
we were in over our head. Like, so we're talking about stuff, and then new evidence comes to light, and like part of it, I do believe because of the show, we got the BCI to be released. And so like that caused a major change. And then now all of a sudden, we had all this information. We had so much information that we started working with the web sleuth community and different people that we met. So it was very cool because people with different skill sets would come forward. Like
really
there'd be
interactive.
a video guy that he's like, I know a lot about video. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to give you some of these, see if you can clean them up, see if you can do this. And then
We were trying to figure out how the weather was when he went missing, and we just shouted out like, "Are there any meteorologists that listen?"
And there was.
In like in Indiana,
That's
and like
awesome.
he gave us like what the day would have been, and
Yeah.
we're trying to figure out if you could fly a drone. That's what it was.
Yeah.
So
We're still arguing that. So our wives are helpful too. Like my wife is on Facebook on the Justice for Brian Macron page, and so she just was talking to me about that today because there's people like will still keep bringing
it's
up
got
the
a life
same
of
old
its own.
stuff, but
It's just
I think
it's cool.
we couldn't have done it without our wives.
Of course.
Yes.
None of us can.
But I think we grew along with the podcast too. Like we learned as we were going. Like I don't think we'd really do much different other than maybe how long we just let certain like interviews go and stuff like that, just to tighten things up a bit. But you know, like once you start getting out there and people start talking about it, like it is kind of hard to. You can't control what people say or what
Oh,
they
yeah.
think.
He's got to forget it out of it.
And that's why we just went out of our way to never accuse anybody of anything, even though we have our suspicions.
Darren and I were talking about like we should set up a table like this and put Darren Macron was murdered, change my mind, and then just put it out on
Brian
Medina
Macron.
Square.
Wait, what?
Brian was murdered this time.
Oh,
Darren's still living and doing well.
Oh,
Damn.
no. That means you're related to him? Oh, no.
There is a Darren Macron.
Yeah, his brother's name's Darren too.
Oh,
yeah.
that's.
Weird, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's not too many of those.
Time to speculate. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, how has that, changed? Because I think at one point you guys even said, like, we never expected this to happen. Like, we don't, like, you basically said, we didn't know what the hell we were doing starting out.
Yeah.
Here we are. Like, we didn't expect for this.
We thought we were going to get the Molke Menembe numbers, which are like
Negative
7
6.
and 5 people, being pissed off that you made it.
the only people that
Yeah,
listen
it's
to it are
like,
the
why
only-
did you listen to it if you hated it so much? But, and like his father, I was at their house for a cookout at Darren's house, and Darren's father was like, right before we were releasing the first episode, like, are you nervous or whatever? I'm like, no, like, no one's going to listen to this, like, it's going to be fine. And then started checking like our analytics, and it was like 3,000 downloads. I'm like, oh,
shit.
okay. And then a couple, like, after like the second episode, I get a call from a producer at one of the major networks calling from New York. And I'm like, how did you get my number? And like, he wanted to talk about the Macron case. He's like, I was listening to the second episode and I hit pause to find you. It's like, okay. So I knew that like we were on to something
Yeah.
different now.
Right.
And like, we're still hoping that they come in. And I think that that's what this case needs at this point is we said it a couple times on the show, like we've reached the point what a podcast can do. You know what I mean?
Right.
With,
Especially with the Facebook
Yeah.
connection. Trying to
Well,
figure out that message.
but there are some major, one of the 3 main networks has a crime show and they want to come in and cover the Macron case. And I think that would be really beneficial.
So, real quick, if there's anything that, if I can't imagine that someone's going to listen to this that hasn't listened to yours.
You never know.
That knows anything.
You never know.
But if somebody does have any type of information, anything like that, like who to
Crime
contact?
Stoppers.
Is that just like crimestoppers.com or like?
Yeah, I mean, they can go on Google. I don't have the number memorized, but call like
they have a number
the
there.
Cleveland office. You can pretty much call any Crime
There's a
Stopper and they'll
reward.
be able to figure it out. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's.
there's still
I
a
got
reward.
you. Okay.
And then call us.
But if you know something, call Crime Stoppers.
Yeah, I think at one point, how many people have listened to that story on your guys' podcast at this point?
A
Do you
whole
know?
lot.
A whole lot.
Yeah, I think it's looked several months ago and like it was over 30,000, and I haven't looked.
It's cool too.
Yeah,
'cause
you
it's
might
like,
not want to look now because it might be like, oh,
well, we'll get alerts like you falling off the South Africa charts. Like we were on the South Africa chart.
That one was weird. Like
what are
it
they
was
getting from us?
trending in Italy for a while. I'm like,
Yeah.
like why would they care about this in Italy? Some of these things I think are like weird, just aberrations that happen.
Yeah.
or someone's using like a VPN.
Or like the AI for whatever is just like keeps recommending it to Italians. Like, listen to this. Like we may have mentioned pizza at some point in there or something. I don't know how that happened, but
Well, I mean, regardless of because it's obviously local to us.
Yeah.
Because you guys, we've talked about it, I think before we started recording, you guys are about half an hour away from us. And that's how I heard about it, was from somebody that lived in the area and knew about it. But I mean, regardless of where you live, like it's, taking the I guess the personal aspect of the story out of it. It's an incredibly interesting story. And it's, like I said, you listen to the facts and you start to listen to some of the things that are going on. It's like, this is kind of mind blowing. Like, and then you think, at least I do, like, how often does this happen across the nation? Where it's just somebody just basically drops the ball on something, or they just don't have the right evidence to find someone's murder, or whatever it might be. Like, it just,
I think it happens kind of a lot. And I've been researching a lot doing this show and researching about staged suicides too. So that's a whole other crazy phenomenon. It's like the unicorn of suicides. And so, that's what the authorities are alleging, that this was an elaborate staged suicide. Most of the suicides that you see that are staged are actually homicides staged to look like suicides. There's an even rarer version of that where somebody kills themselves but stages it to look like it was a murder.
right. I think the only reason to do that would be for like insurance purposes
Yeah.
or something like that.
I
But
guess, or like, just to spare your family the shame. But really, I mean,
yeah, I guess that's true too.
it's actually horrible for the family.
Right. Because then, especially if they never know.
Yeah, no closure. I don't think that this case was that. I just, the mechanics of the case don't work.
I guess, so is there any evidence what is the evidence that actually would show that it was a suicide? Because the stabbing that doesn't tell me suicide. The no water in the lungs, like he didn't even attempt it. He didn't drown himself.
Can you
So
have
that's
more of a story? Because I'm at like 60% of the story. So like, there's gaps that need filled for me.
Yeah, so
Everybody else.
yeah, we'll go listen to the podcast. But yeah, well,
You can find it anywhere
Yeah,
that you get your podcasts.
yeah. But so I guess we talked about that before. Was he went missing? They found blood in his office, and then there was a lot of things that happened in between that were just
One of the big
Strange.
things. Okay.
Leading up to him missing, he was telling people there's this irate citizen of the town that keeps calling me, and like,
Angry resident.
and he would get calls in the middle of meetings, like, I gotta go, angry resident. And so he had set up he was gonna meet the angry resident early in the morning. He was gonna have one of the sheriff's deputies, right?
Yeah, it's the township contracted with the sheriff's department, and it was that he rode along with this guy a lot.
And he was gonna have him hide there to like back him up when he meets the guy. And
So
he was like,
it's like
I'm carrying
Operation
a gun.
Angry Resident. They're going to do a sting.
They were
The
gonna
cops are
pull the
hide
truck
in the
out.
closet.
They were gonna pull the truck out
For real.
of the bay, and he was gonna park his cruiser in there, and he was gonna have this other trustee who's
This
got his
whole
CCW.
elaborate plan involving guns. And anyways, before they can show up, because that's supposed to be like 7 or 8.
Supposed to meet at 8, and they're supposed to be there at like 7:45.
Now, was that all verified? Because it sounded like from the story you guys told, it was just a lot of people were saying that this
A
was.
lot
Yes.
of people saying.
So we have to know, the main people that are saying it are the other trustees. So the cop that we mentioned, his name is Jim Sanford. He doesn't recall being briefed on an angry resident.
Well, not the plan, but he knew about the angry resident.
right, but he
though.
doesn't recall
He knew
being
the
briefed
story,
to be there.
but he didn't know about that day.
Yeah, but those like you said, those two things can be completely separate. There can be an angry resident that's
Yeah, but
think
you
you're
get to the
right.
point where it's like, how many coincidences are we
And
gonna
it
have
seems
in one
fishy.
day?
Like, nobody asked who the angry resident was. You'd be like, who is this guy? What is he pissed about? You know what I mean?
It seems like BS.
if we're gonna do a meeting, like, let me find out who you are and what your problem is, so that I could talk intelligently to you. Have like, are you mad about some zoning thing? Like, let me pull the records and.
Yeah, it doesn't make
But
sense.
they
And
could never pinpoint because they have the phone records. They could never pinpoint the phone calls when this
To a
call would happen.
specific-
And so some of the witnesses recall Brian getting a phone call from an angry resident, and they have a specific time and date. When we look at the phone records, there's no phone call at that time.
see lots of weird financial
So you're
stuff
like,
going
okay.
on.
Actually, Brian was in Columbus with his daughter when one of the witnesses remembers him getting a phone call from an angry resident. So they weren't even in proximity to each other.
and that's
He just had so much stuff going on.
yeah, and I think that's one thing I didn't even know. So like, there's so many things in this. It's hard to like Cass asked, like to have more of a story to it, like here, because there's so much to it that it's kind of unbelievable. You know what I mean? Like all the little things. Like she was listening to some of it, and she was like, "Holy shit, this is crazy." And I'm like, what'd you just listen to? She's like, this part. I was like, what? It gets way crazier than that. Like, and then like she texts, oh my God, are you kidding me? Like, I'm like, no, just wait, it gets even crazier. And so there's, but I guess going back to the gist of it. So there's a lot of things that happen. He actually left his house super early in the morning,
Yes.
and never came back.
Right. And now we find that his phone is pinging somewhere that is not near his office or his home. Like
And this was all discovered
after the
much
BCI
much
closed.
later.
Yes.
like so years later.
Stuff that, apparently the investigators had but didn't talk about. And I'm trying to give you like kind of the general proximity, but he would live kind of a straight shot towards his office, more or less.
It's
right?
probably easiest to use the lake, So if you're like, if the lake's out here, he's here to the office, and he's pinging over here.
Which lake is that?
Chippewa Lake.
Chippewa Lake.
You can pull that up. Because I hear you guys talking about these things.
Yeah.
I'm like, man,
It's
like,
actually-
it'd be nice to like be able to see it, like be able to see it. And
It's
go,
a very
oh.
interesting lake. You
What
know that?
road? I'm
It's
sorry. Go
a
ahead.
natural lake, 30,000 years old. It was formed in like the last ice age, and depending on which sources you read, you'll find evidence that the north end of the lake, the water ends up in Lake Erie, and the south end it flows out to
There's two
the Ohio
watersheds.
River. So
Yeah.
that's like
Kidding.
weird that
Something
one
divide.
lake has
That's
two
interesting.
watersheds. So I mean, I just think the lake itself
It
is
was
kind
like
of
an
interesting.
amusement park in like the turn of the
Yeah.
century,
Yes.
1900s or whatever.
It's now a Scooby Doo ghost town
It's
for
Scooby-Doo
real.
goes down. Yep. Well, I think they
There's
tear
not
it
that
down.
much right now.
Yeah, yeah, she's got some pictures. So like you'll see like
You
the
can go to-
Abando roller
It's part of the
coaster.
You're
amusement
almost
park.
like go to like a
You
Google
talked about
Maps.
the amusement park.
That's so weird. Go to the maps. Just so I can see like a vertical.
So his house is up on the north Orion Road. You see that? So you got the lake. Go to the right, two streets. There's Ryan Road. He lives up north of that. Okay. The township hall is down closer to it's 42. So if you go pull the screen up a little bit, so go north. You can
Yeah.
see the
Yep.
Lafayette
Okay, Lafayette
storage.
Township, yeah.
That's the township, yeah. And then he pinged down close to Westfield Road. So let's see where 42 kind of diagonals. Westfield comes straight. So if you drop back down, so that would have been his route. Would have been that
So this
way.
is when he gets out of bed.
He
He's
pings
supposed to be going to
down
his office.
Westfield and Kennard down at the bottom. He's pretty close to there. Is where the
There's
the
Kennard
ping
Road
is.
down there,
So-
way,
and then-
way
so-
below the watershed there.
So where's his house at? His house is on
north. So quite a bit north.
So he's going way out of his way.
So he's north of the.
north. So if you follow Ryan and keep going
He's
north.
north of the trustee office.
Yes.
Okay. So he actually. So theoretically, the story goes, he gets up, or like what 2:00 in the morning, something like that. Leaves
Yeah.
the house. Doesn't tell his wife where he's going. No one really knows technically where he's going. His phone, we find out months and years later, that actually pinged south of the lake, which is beyond the trustee office and where the blood
Yeah.
was found.
It makes no sense for him to be over
Yeah,
there.
so he goes south of where the blood was found in the trustee office, south of the lake, and then where in the lake was he? Where was his car at? Because I know then
So-
that they found his car the next morning.
So his car.
right?
So see all the development there. The beach side is the one that runs right around the lake
you see it curve in there.
on the
It's in that grayed out
Up on the
area.
northeast end,
like,
right
yeah,
there.
right in
That's
there.
Beachside Boulevard.
So he was found kind of more closer to Longacre and Beachside, almost the corner down there in the bottom.
But his car was found on the north.
That's
so
where-
this
that's
car,
where
that's where his car was
found.
parked.
He was found up in the northwest corner of the lake,
so his car was parked in the southeast corner of the lake,
kind of
That's
I mean, more
central.
central of the lake, kind of
on the on
On
the
the-
west side,
on the
on the east side.
east side.
Okay.
And then he was found in the northwest corner up there. Now you see the inlet coming down the blue.
Yep.
So there's a current that then goes straight through the lake all the way down. So first of all, the outside of the lake was frozen,
Right.
and so there's not. I mean, you would have a clear idea if he literally walked out there and broke through the ice and drowned, right? But if he even did that and they didn't find him, he would be on the southern portion
way
of
the
the lake
current
because of the
runs.
current. Instead, he's up there. So, which means either he went in at the very, it's kind of marshy up through there. So either he went in like kind of. My theory is he went off of Chippewa Road. There's a bridge right there. That would have been, and it's pretty. There's not a whole lot of houses in that area.
Gotcha.
If he was murdered, that would be an easy spot to just kind of throw him over.
Now,
So
if we go with the devil,
So real quick, so for anybody who's not watching this, and this will be on YouTube, so it's probably going to be better to watch some of this stuff than listen to it. But just so people are listening to it, so you have this lake in this township. His house, you have the three key points here would be the lake, the township office where the blood was found, and then his home. So his home is north of the township office, right? And then there was blood and a scuffle found at the office.
Right.
And that is in between his home and the lake. And his car was found the next day on the east side of the lake. And then his body months later was found on the northwest side of the lake. And in that process, when he left, didn't tell anybody where he was going, we don't know, but theoretically would have had to. What was the blood in the township that was verified as his?
Yes.
Okay.
And I brought you pictures, and one of the things that you'll want to look at later on is the fact that there's quite a bit of blood in the office and very minimal blood in the car.
Right.
And remember, the official timeline is the office happens first, then the car, then he goes to the lake and wanders around.
Right. But I think a key point to that was, which I didn't quite. This is kind of where I kind of knew what you guys were talking about, but without seeing it and kind of understanding it. So when even if he left the office all bloodied up or whatever that was, he at one point he had to go south of the lake and then around it or whatever, park on one side of the lake and somehow end up on the other side of the lake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's, just the
So-
route is weird. And there's
so-
like, why was he driving all the way down there? Like, what did he?
Especially when you try to take into consideration that this was a cold night. It never got above 5 degrees, I don't think. I mean, the high for that day was 17, but at night the temperatures were down as low as 5 degrees. He wasn't dressed for the weather. He lost quite a bit of blood. He didn't have his glasses. Imagine him like
He didn't have his
stumbling
wallet
around.
either,
No
correct?
wallet.
Right.
And cell phone was supposedly in the township hall.
But to cover that much ground without leaving footprints or blood droplets or anything, you know what I mean? Like,
There's a lot of questions.
yeah.
But you
To
also
say
got
the
to.
least.
So that ping though is at 1:46 in the morning. His car, at least, the car they're assuming is Brian's pulling in because there's a gas station on the corner there. It's got a nice camera, so you can see some traffic going in there. But it's you don't know for sure. But if we assume that that's his car, it pulls in around 1:50. So he would have had to have gone down, left his house, gone around the lake, and then gone up to the township hall, which wouldn't have made.
Because his wife
ton of
doesn't know
sense.
exactly what time he left, correct? They don't.
Right.
No, I think
Because-
she said she was aware that he was getting up, but sometimes he would sleep on the couch because he got too hot.
Just like, when you're in bed with your wife and one of you guys gets up to go to the bathroom, whatever, like maybe you kind of wake up
You're
and
aware
you're like,
You don't
they
make a
left,
big deal
but
about it.
not-
go back to sleep.
Right.
It's at least that's the way that she's saying it.
And I don't think that, to me, that didn't raise any questions. Like, okay, yeah, if I get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, which I do often because I drink a bunch of water or whatever, like,
Yeah.
then my wife would
Unless you
never-
got an insane spouse. Like, where you going?
Yeah.
Like, you better check in with
Yeah,
me.
If I have to check in when I get up to go
Sign-
pee
sign
at
out.
midnight,
Might need counseling.
Yeah, I might need more than counseling. I might need a lawyer. So that happens. They find his car the next day. And there was something weird too. We don't have to dive into all the details and a bunch of this stuff, but the weird things was like, it seemed like did the police show up at their house even before like the wife really knew that he was missing?
They were calling her.
Yeah, so she got up and she went to work around, I think, close to 8 o'clock. The oldest daughter was home at the time, who was in like college age. So they found the office around 7:20, I think, is the official, is when the maintenance man arrived to the township hall.
Gotcha.
So everything was kind of in place over there, and
So do they think that's why like the police were contacting them because they're like, hey, like his office is
Yeah,
a
they're like,
disaster.
something's
something's
something went
weird.
down.
Okay, that makes sense.
yeah, I don't think that's too fishy. I mean, I know that they came in the house per, like we had on the podcast from Victoria. What I never got an answer on is whether they were invited in or not. But I mean, at that point, I think it was just, there's just
Chaos.
hysteria going on,
Yeah.
I mean, your dad, it's like everybody's looking for him, and
Some of the benefit of that interview too is just that first person account, and you kind of got to take that as it is too, because it's
Oh,
someone's
for sure.
opinion.
Yeah.
But it's just good. I mean, And something we try to do on our podcast, and in our next season, we're doing the Circleville letters, and
Yeah, I want to talk about those.
we
too.
try to just talk to people actually involved instead of like just reading it off the, like what we used to do.
So we're never going to do another Mulcahy ever.
It's our solemn pledge.
Yeah.
Sorry, but
No, yeah, no, it makes sense. So that there were some weird things that happened around that, but nothing like too crazy. It just seemed kind of more, like you said, just chaotic, more than anything. But then at one point, it seems like there were some, they got people into to clean up everything really quickly, which that seemed kind of suspicious. Yeah. And then there was a painter involved, I think, that said that he's like heard about some or saw some knives being thrown away.
Yeah,
he talked
he
about
was
the knife.
awesome.
Yeah,
you talked
he's a
about-
fun dude. That's Bob Popovich, so he's a painter. And what you said is 100% accurate. So the turnaround time from crime scene to let's repaint and recarpet this office is like less than 24 hours. Oh, she's got some of the pictures pulled up.
Is that his office?
Yeah,
Yeah,
So it's technically not an
conference
office.
room.
Yeah, it's a back conference room. That's where they typically would like meet and get stuff done. Like there wasn't like a separate office for each trustee.
Yeah, and that even the patterns of that seem kind of like I'm not once again, like I talked about in the Bitcoin episode you brought up, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm also not a detective. But that doesn't seem like, it seems kind of weird that it looked like it wasn't like, it looked like there was a struggle there or something, because it looked like it was smeared and like, you know what I mean? That doesn't look like somebody just dripping blood all over the place.
Yeah.
Like
To me, it looks like he sat in that area for a while and bled.
Try to
And
get
try
up
to get
or
up.
fell down when.
I can see, yeah, maybe that too. But yeah,
And it-
then if you're there bleeding out, like how did he get up and then drive himself?
That's what I'm saying.
And
In
walk
the
out.
car, very minimal amount of blood. So I don't know how much blood that is. And just like you said, I have all the same disclaimers that I'm not any, expert in anything. But if my house, I'm like, that is an alarming amount of blood, right?
Yeah.
And in the car, there's really not much, like a droplet or two. So that makes it weird if you follow the official timeline that like this is suicide. And guys like, this is going too good. Let me slow shit down because I want to go and freeze to death.
Right.
Like
Because that seems to be the only viable cause of death at this point. Because if you said they don't know,
We don't know. Yeah,
And
we
so-
don't know how he died. That's true.
and he had 6 stab wounds, but
And if you were trying, because there's on the opposite side of people that still kind of follow the official report, say he screwed up. Like he was trying to look like he got beat up and he wanted to be found. That's like one of the most recent ones they're coming back at us with. But if he wanted to be found, why would he leave the place he told everybody he was going to be at?
right. And I mean, you can get beat up and get stabbed and cut without stabbing yourself enough to kill yourself.
Yeah. Well, I think the bigger question is if this is a stage crime scene, like why would you stage this if you were going to end up dead? You know what I mean? So like we hear there's all kinds of new theories and like all kinds of people coming after us. But like what my brother mentioned that, Brian he wanted to be found and look like a victim and stuff like that. But
Which
It's
I
just-
mean, I could see. I mean, people do that. You know what I mean? But like you said, that's awfully weird. Why
Then
would you
leave?
you
why
don't
would
do
you
such a
leave?
good job of killing yourself then.
Right? Why would you leave and go somewhere where no one's going to find you at 2:00 in the morning?
And the $1,000 question still is like, how did you get into a frozen lake with no water in your lungs? Like,
Yeah.
how could you be dead
Even
before you got into the water?
Yeah, because even if he fell, like he got too close to the lake or something like that, and his, the blood loss caused him to fall, he'd still be breathing a little bit. Like that's a weird time frame to, die as you're falling and stop breathing as you hit
Right.
the water. Like
And that's like we were saying.
seems
All of a
strange.
sudden, you're jumping through all these hoops just to go along with the official explanation. It's like,
And you've also got they talk about the body being in such good condition for being in the water for that long. I mean, wouldn't you think like if you're out in the elements and like animals and stuff? I mean, if you're laying along the shoreline, I mean, we've got tons of coyotes.
right. So that's a good.
You know what I
point.
mean? Like he should have been torn up.
Right. So that's a good point, because I think the other one thought process is, well, he died or he killed, whatever it was, he died like along the shore, and then the lake flooded, which ended up bringing him into the lake.
Yeah.
Like basically he receded back into the lake,
Mm-hmm.
which to your point, like, because if you just fall into the cold water when it's 10 degrees, that's going to preserve you pretty well if you're just in the water and that's it. But like
But
you said,
the
if
way
you're
the story goes, I mean, at least that's Forrest Thompson's kind of when he did
That's
that
the
release.
prosecutor.
That's the prosecutor of Medina County. When he did that release, he kind of assumed that he walked up north on Beachside to get up to the inlets because why he wouldn't just walk straight in beyond me? Let's just walk forward and then laid down somewhere where they couldn't find him, even though there was a lot of searches. But then the weird part is the people that didn't search either. Like, that's we should talk about that too.
Yeah. So there was
But,
a lot of foot searches
and they
that the
couldn't
Parks
find him.
Department conducted, and so they went all around the perimeter of the lake, and half of that is kind of a suburban area, so it's people's backyards, and if you ever go there, you'll notice that like a lot of the yards are kind of sloped, and they're fenced off, so it would be hard for someone in his condition to get over there, and then even harder to get back into the lake if he was behind the fence line. So if he's on the front of the fence line, it's pretty much wide open there. It's not really a place to hide.
And it sounds like they did a pretty good job searching the Parks Department.
Yes, but the
yeah.
people that you're referring to that they declined is that there was Brian Macron was a veteran. He was a former Marine. There's a veterans group that they do search and rescue for fallen veterans, and they have dog teams, and they wanted to come, and the sheriff told them they would not be welcome if they came. There's also another veterans group that has a boat
is there a reason
that can
for that?
detect skin cells in the water, and they wouldn't allow them to come either.
Did they give any reason for that?
No.
Because once again, just weird stuff.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of weird things that go. So basically, we're past the point where he's gone. This and then there's even more irregularities in the searching for him because, like you said, they wouldn't allow the people to bring their dogs to like look for him, and then. I think you guys mentioned there was like someone that offered to come and do drone searches too, and they said
Well,
no.
they had
Had a
drone.
drone. Brian Macron used to work for a company called Vista Technologies before he was a trustee, and their company donated 2 drones, one with a regular full spectrum like camera and one with the thermal imaging camera. And Sergeant Sanford, who's the guy that was supposed to be hiding out and waiting to, on Operation Angry Resident, was the point man for this transaction and was trained to use the drones. And I'm sure there was other deputies that were trained to use the drones, but they had 2 drones donated by Brian Macron's company, but they didn't use them. Yeah, we've been racking our brains trying to figure out like what would have prevented the drones from coming out that.
those things from happening. That's the question. It's like it just seems awfully weird.
Yeah, it
So
does.
like, and again, it's just one like we talked about. It's just one of these things where there's just so much weird stuff that stacks up. You just at some point it's just like, well, fuck, I don't know.
Well, I want you to do this because this is an interesting thought exercise. Put yourself in the deputy's official mind at this time because they see what you saw with the blood in the car at the lake, and they say, he's in California. Don't waste your freaking time with the drone. Don't waste your time with the dog. Dude's in California. That's what they came up with. That was what they believed at the time, that Brian Macron had some financial trouble and is now surfing off of Long Beach.
Right. Which is also another weird thing. And
I don't know why they got that, but that's what
yeah.
they came up with.
So, well, I guess too, there's so we've kind of gone through the story a little bit, and we understand that there's irregularities from the get go, and there's even if you listen to your guys's podcast, there's even more irregularities that we've even come close to touching on.
A lot.
There's it's just a constant irregularity across the board, with in little tiny things, just for seemingly no reason. But so we've gotten to the point where they know he's gone, and for whatever reason, the narrative is from some people that he's up and left. He faked his, he faked his murder and he left. And then you guys start getting more information about just other things because we didn't even touch on I guess he was a private like jewelry dealer or a intermediary like jewelry dealer, so he traveled a lot. And that's not all that weird, but there was some other things that like in his background that just started coming unearthed, and it was like he's tied into a lot of different things. And I don't want to, you can listen to all the info, whatever. Like, and the goal is not to just make it salacious, but it just becomes really strange because he's tied into so much, but there's so much other stuff going on. Like if they wanted to make an excuse or something, like I feel like there's a lot of excuses, a lot of things they could have made up rather than, oh, he went to California. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of different things people could say. Well, Well, obviously.
It was very specific. It's not like, oh, he ran away. It's like, oh, he's probably in California.
Yeah. So like, and maybe I'm skipping ahead here, but I don't. You had somebody on that made not an assumption, but just threw the idea out that possibly he was somehow tied into, like government intelligence or something like that.
Yeah.
I know that's one of the crazy theories, but there's a
Yeah.
lot of
It's out there.
He kept a number of like contacts with like military contractors for some reason, which seems weird.
because he didn't seem to be involved in any of it.
Yeah.
No, and according to it was from Phil Hartman. He said when his body was found, a federal pay scale was in his wallet. So if that's true, that's odd because he's supposed to be no longer employed by the Department of Defense
For a long time.
for a long time.
There's irregularities in his travel, so that was kind of weird. Like he was supposed to be at like a township meeting, and he's like, "Oh, I got on the wrong flight. I'm in Los Angeles." Well, I mean, how can you get on the wrong flight these days?
That's
You know what I
I
mean?
don't think you could do that anymore, right?
Yeah.
In 2015, 2014, whenever
He would
that
go
would've
dark
been.
sometimes too. Like he would shut off the GPS on his phone, and going through, we have like the last year of his phone record. So there'd just be times when he just goes totally dark, like he's purposely shutting off the GPS on his phone.
And the other phone that
Can't
was
track his
found,
movements.
they found another phone in his console of his car. When they found it, it was
Just kind of weird.
turned off. But
Do they know who that was?
It's supposedly his old phone, but like, who keeps their old phone in there?
And then we got to talk
That's
about
what
the
they're
weirdest
cracked.
thing, because you never know. Somebody listening to your show
the crazy
might know
thing.
what this hustle is.
yes,
Yes.
we asked
Like,
everybody this.
We've been racking our brains.
I heard this part and I was like, I don't even know what to do with all this.
Somebody
to slap that.
Somebody's got to know. I mean, it has
This is really interesting.
Lay it out.
So there are these insane credit card purchases and receipts or returns, and you'll see like over the course of a year, almost $1 million worth of credit card purchases and almost $1 million worth of returns.
That's a lot that's a lot of weird activity.
That
for
is,
a town
I mean,
trustee.
and like we talked to somebody that worked at Target where they distinctly recall Brian coming up there to the electronics section, and this guy says he remembers it because they had the TVs and they were playing the Ohio State Michigan game or something. So they're talking about that for a minute. They're bullshitting about Ohio State and Michigan. He's like, I would like 2 iPads, and that's something that they have to keep behind the counter because it's a high stolen item. Selling 2 iPads. He walks to the front of the store and returns them, so that come right back to that guy, and he's
15
like, "Wait,
feet away.
yeah, he just watched the whole thing go down." He's like, that's really weird. But even weirder is the fact that Brian Macron appears to be losing money on this. Like when you look at all of it and you crunch the numbers for that whole year, it's a long list. He's short like $500.
He's not making points. It's not credit points because of the time limit of the returns. It wouldn't be enough to get points.
And if it's to get cash back, the max amount that we've seen for a whole year is $500. So it seems like a whole lot of work.
You buy like a lawnmower? A lawnmower in Texas and have it delivered to Texas when obviously he lived in Ohio.
A
and then return it.
refrigerator, like in Oklahoma City, that gets returned before he leaves the store.
Yeah, like big ticket item stuff.
We don't know why.
Yeah. You got any thoughts on that,
The
Tony?
wheels are turning. Nothing
Yeah,
yet.
yeah, because I know you haven't finished all the episodes. I know you said you listened to
yeah, I'm
you were listening to it, but like that was one thing. Like when you guys started talking about that, it's almost like you throughout the story. You have to like put it into like all these different categories, and go, okay, let's deal with this category by itself. Let's deal with the police not doing their jobs properly, and then some of the information around that's like you could even speculate. Okay, are they not doing their jobs properly because they just screwed up, or because they just didn't care, or because there's some kind of weird involvement going on? Like all of those 3 things are theoretical possibilities. And then you look at, some of the township things that were going on. It's like, all right, are these people just, in chaos and they don't know what's going on, or are they doing some of this stuff intentionally?
Yeah.
And then you look at, this thing and this thing, like there's so many different categories of, okay, well, is this just happening coincidentally, or is this part of it?
And then we had like Nexus Pipeline coming through at that time, that's a big thing, huge thing in the community. They're throwing around lots of money. So that looks like, could that have been a motive? We know that Brian was against the pipeline.
And they were supposed to vote on that on December 19th. All 3 trustees.
And he went missing, 4 days earlier?
He went on the 16th.
Yeah, so
3 days
morning of the
16th.
16th.
So it's just like, and a lot of people could probably look at that, because I look at that and go, probably not, unless somebody, because usually if something like that's gonna happen, it's like what, it's got to be some kind of money involved, you know. But that's
there was
also
money to be made from it.
There's money involved with Nexus.
But this was
Like millions of dollars with
If he
Nexus.
voted against it, would that cancel it or
Probably
change
not.
a lot of things?
They probably
You know what I
couldn't
mean?
have stopped
No,
it.
I don't think we really buy that.
But one of the things we think is, was he trying to alert people? Like, if you look at the last phone calls that he made, he's calling high-ranking law enforcement officers and a newspaper reporter. They look at the pictures that we had over there of the office. You'll see like a neat records room, and there's a duffel bag just kind of sticking out of the corner. Like, was Brian going there? Or did he get caught in there trying to take paperwork out? Was he threatening to expose somebody else? I mean, none of it
we
adds
just
up.
don't know.
These aren't personal phone calls, though. I mean, like, he's calling top law enforcement agents on their personal cell phone numbers
He was visiting a
hours
private
before he
eye.
disappears.
Yeah, we have reason to believe he was seeing it, like also a private investigator locally. We don't know that for sure though, but that's a potential out there too.
It's
What-
weird.
Did Victoria have anything to say about his weird returns?
She was not aware of it at all.
Do you believe her?
I
I
do
think
tend to believe her. I still am in pretty
I think
direct
that's
contact with her.
and I think that's an important point too. And I think I think a lot of people look at, you know, they listen to these stories, you know, similar stories or whatever, and they look at some of these cases and they go, and you know, you find out that somebody, you know, the victim ended up being involved in something not so great, and people initially in your mind you go, well, not that big of a deal then. Like he had some dirty laundry. Well, yeah, but kind of don't we all in a sense? Like does that one thing that he may have been doing really made it okay that, you know,
right.
he was potentially murdered?
The sentence isn't death.
Right, exactly. So like, you know, there's a lot of weird things that just add up, and you have to kind of be able to split those things and look at these things all separately. And once again, going back to you could speculate about a lot of things, about most of the things, but like going back to the credit card thing, that just doesn't make any sense.
Mm.
You know, there's a lot of things throughout the case that were weird, and you could put and speculate and put a guesstimation to it. But like you said, like some of these calling a bunch of people that wouldn't make sense, that are ranked, you know, or police officers and different things. And then what's this credit card stuff? Like he seemed like he was involved in so many things that just didn't add up.
I would just love to know what that hustle was all about. I mean, like, you'd have to be doing it. It would have to benefit you in some way to do it, right? I mean, unless you just had some kind of weird, crazy compulsion that you had to buy random stuff and then return it immediately.
Yeah. I mean, there's weirder people out there. There's like those people that eat toilet paper.
Yeah.
So, you know,
You ever
he
see
just
My
likes
Strange Addiction?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
My Strange Addiction. He just liked buying things and returning them, but like that seems
Immediately.
awfully. That's probably a little too strange.
It seems like the reward factor is like a little bit further off. You don't even get to unbox the item or play with it. You know what I mean?
And maybe it's nothing, but that's kind of the thing with this case that I think made it really interesting and maybe got us in a little trouble. It's like it's all uncovered ground. So we're just bringing everything.
Right.
And then people were calling us like, oh, crap, well, we got to get this guy on because that's interesting. And all of a sudden now kind of down the road, it's like, okay, well, we kind of got really taken down the road on that one, and maybe that's not true. But, you know, again, we never made any claims. We were just trying to get it out there to get people talking about it because nobody was talking about it.
Yeah, and all you can do is speculate on it because there's what else?
Yeah.
Right.
There's no.
No, the fact is just that he was found in the lake with no water in his lungs, 6 stab wounds, and they want us to believe it was a suicide.
Yeah, and a lot of weird shit on the back end.
Yeah.
Yeah. The weird part is you know, like, so we kind of thought like Macron was gonna start to like calm down, and then this other website popped up. But it's weird that they're so adamant about that he did it to himself.
Yes.
Now, mind you, they early on sent a letter. The one trustee sent a letter. It's on their website that asking the sheriff why they're not moving stuff along and doing what they're supposed to be doing. They were frustrated with it, and they felt that their residents needed some answers and updates. You know, but then all of a sudden they've just come out and they are all for that Brian did this to himself, and it's mind-boggling why they feel so adamant on defending it.
And that's the weird thing for me too. It's like from looking at it, like I mentioned earlier, there's so many things that you could speculate on, particularly as law enforcement. Like, well, he was involved in this and this. We found some irregularities with this credit card. Like, we know he might be involved in some weird things. But being so adamant about that he did it to himself, it just, for the normal person, you look at that and go, well, that doesn't make any sense. Like, that just, in my mind, it's like, well, that just points the finger back at you because you're making these claims that just seem really odd when they could be making claims that, well, we just don't know. He was involved in a lot of weird things. We just don't know.
There's no reason for these trustees to be so defensive. That's the part that I would wish I could reassure them if they're listening to this show, is that, no one has ever accused you of anything.
And everyone's invited on our podcast.
But
we
they
try to get
created
them
this
on.
website just to try to convince the population that Brian Macron murdered himself. And I think that's kind of another one of the head
So that's what
scratchers.
that
It's like, what
whole-
compelled you to...
That website's like,
It's called LafayetteFacts.com. Yeah, and it...
oh, it's like a fact checker.
Yes.
Fake.
Oh,
And so
wonderful.
they've been on
love when
a media campaign.
They made their own affidavits in February of this year. So they
Yes.
all wrote up these things, took
So
them to
those
a
are the
notary,
facts.
and then they said, "We have the facts now. We wrote them down."
Was that the
month.
website that was launched like when they were doing the vigil?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
that's
you heard
They
about
lo-
that.
yeah, I saw
Yeah.
you guys. They had the vigil for Brian,
Right.
And then
But the trustees were, supposed to be having a meeting there, and they didn't. They, for the first time ever, decided to observe COVID protocol and did their meeting via Zoom, and then created a website instead of being at the visual to be like, I miss Brian too. Not a day goes by that I don't miss Brian. They're like, no, we just created a website to prove to the whole world why he killed himself.
once again, that's a weird.
Yeah.
It's just weird.
I mean, like,
And you know what? Now I'll say this right now. Anyone's telling me, "Hey, I have the facts. Here they are. Believe them." I right off the bat don't believe you because I've heard enough facts
Right.
this last year for the rest of my life. Thanks. No.
Same.
And they're not required to comment. Like, we're just doing a podcast. And honestly, we've actually moved on to a different story. And so they're kind of it just makes you wonder why they're so...
the way I think about it is like, say you wherever you work, you have a coworker, and he or she ends up dead mysteriously. And there's people that say that, they were murdered, and other people say that they took their own life. Would you, as the coworker, be like, well, I'm going to make a website to prove that this person killed himself? Like why?
Why?
Like, why?
Just let it
You
go.
don't have a dog in this race, Like, no one's looking at you. No one's trying to say that you had anything to do with it, so you don't need to be so defensive.
Yeah.
Here
There
it
it
is.
is.
And I love this because you can't use this website without listening to the podcast.
Look at this. This is so like I just look at it and like, yeah, no, I don't believe you right off the bat.
We
Fact.
created a sticker. There's a
there-
sticker available
yeah.
from our merch store of a cat with that. There are internet rumors, and then there are facts.
The facts are here. Let's know the truth.
Yeah.
The truth is here. Oh man, they're
Here it is.
really laying it on thick,
Can I
huh?
play it?
That's just
yeah,
a
they should
news
be able to-
article.
They're
So it's
kind of
not
rough
like
on
it's
us
crazy.
in that news article.
Yeah.
Man,
Obviously, the trustees don't like us.
false claim. Lafayette Township trustees are fully in support of the cover-up of the murder.
If you go down, you'll
This
see
is
a lot
something
of
looked at-
links to
geez.
us. Oh, look, there it goes.
I love-
Episode 2 of Invisible Ships podcast. 35-minute mark.
Oh wow.
I want to see Linda and Victoria go at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and and that's the thing. Like, I get.
Look at this one though. This one's kind of sad. It's like false claim. In episode 2 of Invisible Ships podcast, Victoria claims it was weird that Mike Costello and Brian went to a movie. Blah blah blah. Who cares? They like lay out all the times that they ever hung out with Brian and like have the dates, which is a really weird thing to do for a friendship. It's like, no, look, I have my friendship on paper. Here are the times that I
Yeah.
attended a football game or a graduation party. And these are also more or less the compulsory things that you invite coworkers to.
Yeah, I mean, I've invited like that's funny. Yeah, yeah. So I was trying to read that. So they said like false claim in episode 2 of the Invisible Ships podcast. His wife claims it was weird that these two people went because it was
And I just
They went-
listened
they
to that
went-
part today too.
Right.
She said it was weird because she thought she was supposed to go to the movie with him.
right. So people. It's he that the night before he had went out to watch the movie after like a little party thing that they had.
Yeah.
So they went out to the movie, and she said it was weird because originally she was supposed to go, and then like he just
They never
go.
talked. They never called her.
Yeah, and then can you scroll up just a little bit. So it says, so on this website, it says false claim in that episode. You know, she claims it was weird that those two went out to watch the movie that night because she claims Michael and Brian never hung out. The truth. During the years 2010 and 2011, Michael invited Brian and Victoria to summer parties at his house. He never said he went.
Yeah, I know.
He just invited. I've been invited to a lot of things I've never
Invited
gone
your
to.
friends.
I've invited a lot of people to things that they
I've
never came
invited you,
to.
therefore we're
And they're
friends.
they're attacking a phone interview with a widow recorded 4 years after all this, and she wasn't. We didn't make her swear in a Bible or anything.
In 2015, they attended the graduation party of the oldest daughter.
You invite
I've been to a
everybody
lot
and
of
their
graduation
brother.
parties, and I had no idea who the fuck they were.
Right.
Like,
You invite
these are
everybody and their brother
Yeah,
to
so
them.
like, I guess this is the stuff I'm talking about. Like, by doing this stuff, it makes me question it even more.
Yeah,
if those
it sure
people,
is weird.
Yeah, if those people never said anything, I'd be like, oh, whatever. Like,
Protest too much.
See the
Yeah.
links there? Those are all to their sworn affidavits they made that week.
oh wow.
Yeah. click on the sworn affidavit. It's great.
This one?
Any
Yeah.
of them. Yeah.
I mean, I
Actually,
just
Mike's
like
is a
how
great
much
one.
credibility do you give it? So
So,
it's like, and
it's
it's like,
not even
I
a-
saw a Star Wars movie with Brian in an affidavit. Like, is literally like what we're
Like,
working with.
It's not even like a full story. It's just like these tiny little like.
I attended a Christmas party.
Yeah. I solemnly swear.
I've attended a lot of Christmas parties with people I hate.
Did you ever make an affidavit about it?
We should.
Yeah, so I think that's
On
what.
December 15, 2016, I attended a Christmas party and then went to see Star Wars. Like,
So I like I totally I get it, but like this is the stuff that like it's like catching your kid doing something. Like I didn't do it. I didn't do it. And then it's like, okay, cool. And then the next day, well, I didn't do that, right? I didn't. Well, then stop. Why are you bringing it up? Like, you feeling guilty about something?
it's like I'm like, I didn't cheat on you. Like, no one's asking you.
Yeah, like I didn't.
I just went on a business trip.
Yeah. Yeah. It just I guess it just adds to the weirdness of everything.
Yeah.
And that's I didn't realize this was a thing. This makes it even weirder.
I sent you a picture of it.
I didn't realize it was that though. Wow. Yeah, this is a lot of work.
So they actually are proud of this, and they went to several television stations. So they were on Channel 3, Channel 5, 19, trashing us and promoting this webpage. That happened, 2 weeks ago?
I think it's a little longer than that, right? February? Middle? Oh, yes, it is 2 weeks. Not 3 weeks ago. So, yeah, whatever.
I just remember
But-
waking up every day and like my Facebook would be full. Like, hey, they're talking about you on TV again.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild. For just a bunch of guys just trying to talk about just the things that are happening. Yeah, this is a lot of information on here. For what? That's for
Oh, look at this one. On May 2016, I offered Brian $20,000 loan. Like, that's weird too. That you put that in an affidavit.
Yeah, oh, and by the way, he declined.
But then they're trying to tell you that he killed himself because he was in financial difficulties. Like, what kind of dude that's in his eyeballs?
I offered him
dead,
the loan
drunk?
to get him through
what's
Christmas.
That last one, the collection
The big
calls
Christmas.
continued.
He was in debt.
Yeah,
But he's turning down a $20,000 loan.
He's not like insanely in debt though. Like he's not. I mean, there's not that much debt.
there's just a lot of weirdness.
Yeah.
A lot of weirdness.
And he had no big life insurance payout. Like that wasn't a thing either.
Yeah, well, once again, I have more questions now than I did than before you guys walked in the door. Pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So what is this? You mentioned just recently waking up and your Facebook blowing up. Like, how has this affected you guys? Like, because it seems like you guys are just. He said, I bought some podcast stuff when we were bored during the pandemic, so we figured we'd do something. And
Still
then-
wasn't as rough as the way that the Molke Menembe thing was. We didn't get any death threats.
Right.
You got death threats from the
No. We were just like, if we ever see you on the street, we're going to kick your ass.
I'm just gonna punch you in the face, wasting my time.
Never cover cryptids, man. It's a rough world covering cryptids.
I think the biggest thing is it's just cool to make an impact on the conversation. We wanted a conversation, so I guess we got one.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool because Victoria has thanked us over and over and over again for getting the word out. So I think that's cool.
Yeah.
That
Give her a platform. And
She's
like,
got she has a platform.
She
There's
can tell
been
her
other
story.
people coming alongside that's now like in contact with Victoria that's helping, that have got a lot more ability on this than we do. So that's cool. So I mean, I don't know. I think it's been a fun ride. I mean, like every week it was like, I don't know what's gonna happen next, you know.
Right.
But I don't know. I hope it continues though. And I mean, honestly, like this has only helped us. I mean, as far as it's more people talking about it. I'm not seeing the people sway towards suicide. Are you guys?
No, I mean there's
You know what I
there's
mean? Like,
literally
isn't
two
this what
camps,
this
but-
website's supposed to do? I mean, do you think they really got it?
I
I'm
think
still all ears for a good suicide explanation. Like, if there's a good one, I want to hear it. I
Right.
just haven't heard it.
I just don't see it.
So it's him.
Yes.
yeah,
that's
that's Brian Macron.
And then, so those were the trustees. So Linda's the one in the red, and then Mike Costello's the one with the real big smile.
And who's the one in the green? Is that the the administrative?
I think she wasn't there at the
She
time.
might just
Because I remember
be
there
at
was
some
the person
function.
that found the phone or whatever.
Yeah. And that's, I think that's kind of the hard thing too, because, people can watch like murder mysteries and stuff on TV and watch documentaries and hear, it was funny. I was I set up an LLC for this podcast because we're going to start selling the shirts, and doing those things. You start talking to people and sometimes people get upset sometimes down the road and I don't want them to take my house.
Right.
Yep.
But I was sitting there and the lady at the bank was asking me like, oh, like, what is it? Because, people just see chronic curiosity and they're like, well, you just a big weed head? Or
Right,
like, what?
yeah.
Like,
Dispensary?
yeah, like, no, like, can I tell? She's like, oh, that's really neat. And, we were talking about different podcasts and things. And she was like, how much, like, does the normal podcast, like, are people listen to it? I said, I have no idea. Like, I don't know. So I just started this. And I said, there's people that, I feel like people do a podcast that nobody listens to, but they just do it almost like an audio diary in a sense.
Yeah.
I said, but then you have podcasts like Joe Rogan's, which we talk about all the time because millions and millions and millions of people
Yeah.
are listening to him. And she was like, oh yeah, my husband listens to that one. She's like, I'm more of like a murder mystery kind of person. And I was like, have you ever heard of the Invisible Ships podcast? She was like, yes.
What?
She's like, it's so weird. She's like, it's a crazy story.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I was like, actually, they're going to be on my show in a few weeks or whatever. And it was just neat that like people have, heard about, what you guys are doing.
That's cool. Hopefully your banker's listening. Like, hi.
Yeah, maybe her husband listens. It'd be maybe more his style.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, I told her that, hey, I was like, check it out. Like they're going to be on. But it's weird how these interactions with, you have with people completely change your life and where you're at. Like sitting across the three guys that just started podcasts just to.
I was gonna say I was thinking about that because so today's the 13th, right? A
Yeah.
year ago today, I got sent home from work for the shutdown. They're like, we'll probably come back in like 2 weeks.
Oh yeah, 15
that's
days
when
to
all
slow the
this-
spread.
That's when all this started. Yeah, right. Flatten the curve.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, now a year later, we're here talking about the podcast that we did all during that time.
Yeah.
And it's crazy, just from Rick saying he said you want to do a YouTube show. I'm like, yeah, okay. Let's talk about Bigfoot.
Yeah, we should put him in contact with Dylan. Well,
You got a Bigfoot guy?
Well, he's not necessarily a Bigfoot guy. He's been on the show. We were talking about aliens and different things and whatever. And he's a Bigfoot's kind of like his guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
Like it's like
I know exactly.
It's like it's like watching soap operas or something like that for
Yeah.
some people. It's like like
We
watching
love
Bigfoot
that stuff.
documentaries.
But we're never going to cover a cryptid again.
No. Wrestling.
We got too many enemies already.
We don't need a BigfootFacts.com.
No,
Those cryptids, that community, man, like they are.
they're hardcore.
It's cool
Is
stuff,
it-
though.
It's interesting to think about. Have you ever heard listen to I think it's Lore?
Yeah. I like that show.
Yeah.
It's just a little half an hour show where
Yes.
and the reason I like it because he talks about those things. He talks about Bigfoot and like the weird creatures in different places, but it's like he goes back and dissects like all of the lore around it and the actual information and stories. And
To
stuff.
me, that's
That guy's
that's
great.
fascinating. Like I remember I was just reading this book about these lighthouse keepers in Scotland that like they got washed away or something and they disappeared. But the weird part of the book, and this is like a true story, is they find these like little tiny dwellings, and then they like, well, this actually relates back to some of the arcane folklore about leprechauns, and maybe I'm like, what? There was like a pygmy race that maybe was there, but like to me that stuff is almost as fascinating as the actual
Yeah, what is it,
mythology. Is
Homo florensis or whatever,
Yeah.
the hobbits they found.
Right.
So I mean, I don't know. What am I trying to say? I would love to we gotta like our tagline is from true crime to the truly weird. Like we gotta do a little more of the truly weird.
You gotta get into the truly
going down.
weird to
Yeah.
kind of pull that spectrum back a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I know you said, about the Macron thing. So you guys really only planned on doing a couple episodes, and then just because of the outcry and everything, the connections you started to make.
Because people kept coming forward with new information. So every time, like, we'd be like, okay, so this is going to be our last Macron, and we would make the episode, and then there would be somebody that would come out of the woodwork about whatever we talked about, and it'll be like a girl that worked at the gas station. She's like, the deputies were in here, and they were erasing video. I'm like, wait, what? You know what I mean? Like, let me talk to you.
Yeah, we didn't even touch on that. Just it's full of just weird.
Just like every day though, it was something like that. So there was like for a while there, then I started thinking like, well, there's gonna be no end in sight, And then just when we were ready to wrap it up, they closed the case, and then we're like, okay, so now we could FOIA all the documents, and then Darren's pouring through the documents, and he keeps coming across stuff, and like, okay, we have to talk about that. So it went forever.
It's gonna be like just a rolling thing where you maybe put one like an update episode out like
yes,
once every couple
will.
months or something like that.
One day we're going to cover the trial of whoever gets, charged with killing Macron. I can't wait for that day.
You think that's gonna happen? Like, not speculation anymore. You think something's gonna happen where they find something?
I am a betting man, but if I was, I would say that yes, I would probably put money down on it that in the next year or two, there's going to be something that's going to crack.
Bold statement.
It is bold.
He's
I'm
like,
on
I'm not
board.
ready to debate this.
No, I'm on board. I think so too.
I think eventually for sure.
I think there'll be a conviction at some point.
It's being looked into currently still.
In
Not
a way,
officially, I don't
not
think.
officially, but there's stuff that's happening. There's people that are meeting, that are having conversations, and I have hopes.
And there's
lot
a
of
lot of
attention.
weird stuff moving on the periphery of the case too, which is something that you should keep your eye on. Like, how are people reacting? What are they doing? What are they up to?
Well, I think as long as people are still talking about it, it still has life.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
like, what is that thing called? There's a legal term for something when it's settled or not settled. And you could just tell by the community that this is not settled. Just like the JFK thing. Like, officially it's closed, right? But like, how many people can you talk to that believe that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone gunman? Not that many, really. It's not a subtle thing. And Brian Macron, you could put in that same category. That I think the majority of the people don't buy the official narrative. Then
The shadow of the doubt, at least, right? It's not beyond the shadow of a doubt.
it's not settled.
Yeah, I think that's the important part. And I think a lot of that too is you can believe a lot of what's being said, but this is one of the craziest ones that like you look at and you go, man, there's just too much here this is weird.
But in the meantime, we're exploring another case of high weirdness that happened in Ohio, and that's the Circleville letters.
Can I take a pee break real quick?
Yeah,
I
for
drink
sure.
a bunch of water, and then we can, because I want to get into that too, because that sounds super interesting. Sometimes you gotta do that. Yeah. So, what you guys got coming up next? It sounds. At first, I'll be honest. At first, I heard it and I was like, but I saw you guys posting some things about your next project. You don't have to tell us too much, but at least give us the background of what the story is, I guess.
Circleville letters is like one of the craziest cases that ever happened. I think it's like you know what a poison pen letter is, where somebody is like sending these anonymous letters, pre-internet, pre-Twitter. So this is like when hate mail was actually like a shocking thing. Right. There's this whole town in Ohio called Circleville that has its own unique history, but somebody was sending thousands of letters to the residents and to important people in that town that knew exactly what they were up to, like their secrets, was threatening to expose them. Some of the letters contained arsenic. Things spiral out of control. Most of the case centered around a superintendent named Gordon Massey and a bus driver that was reportedly good looking named Mary Gillespie. And
That was reportedly having an affair.
yeah, they were having an affair. And so this guy took great exception to that and started sending letters to them and to other people saying that you need to go and confess your sins, your affair, and I'll stop. They didn't. So like things spiraled to the point where he's putting up signs on the side of the road saying that like Gordon Massey is having sex with Mary Gillespie's 12-year-old daughter. He puts
Really, really nasty.
There's a booby trap on one of the signs with a gun rigged to fire. so that like if Mary was going to go pull the sign down saying that her daughter's sleeping with the superintendent, like it would have fired the gun. And they put a guy in prison for this, right? So he's in prison, and the letters keep coming, and they keep getting postmarked from Columbus, even though he's housed around the state. At one point, the warden puts him in phone and mail restriction where he can't send or receive anything. The letters are still coming.
And he even gets a letter when he's in prison saying, "We told you that you'd never get away with this," or what does it say? "We told you that you'd end up in prison.
Yeah.
When we set them up, they stay set up."
So where we come in, and what's cool for us,
When
is
did
that
this? When did this occur?
this went down in the 70s, and the letters didn't stop until the late 80s while that guy
90s.
was in
Oh,
prison.
yeah, they
No,
went to
the
90s.
76
Oh.
to 93.
But
there
you
was
go.
some weird shit that went down in the 70s, man.
and Ohio is a weird state.
Acid was legal.
Like I was telling them before, like Ohio's like the Florida of the North. Like we got some
Unfortunately,
weird
I
people
agree
here.
with you.
Ohio man.
That's
So-
so weird.
We don't do things like we have a philosophy of the show now that like we're not going to cover a case unless we can talk to the people that were involved, and then if we don't think that we can be the best at it. So we went down to Circleville. We spent a couple days down there getting as much information as we could. We interviewed a couple people that received letters that nobody knew about before. We interviewed Martin Yant, who is the #1 guy in the world about this. He was actually on Unsolved Mysteries. So
Yeah. So that's the
we
thing
got
about this
Unsolved
story.
Mysteries connection, which is freaking.
It was one of the original Unsolved Mysteries episodes. That's how a lot of people know about it. But the catch-22 is there's a ton of stuff on the internet about this case, but it's almost only from Unsolved Mysteries. So if the letter wasn't on the show, it's not on the internet. And what we did is we went down there and went to the library and got all of the letters.
So they're in. They have
scanned them.
all the. They have a bunch of letters. Like
Well, they were entered in the court records. We got some from Marie Mayhew.
Yeah.
We got all the newspaper archives. Like, because when we were looking, we weren't finding much on the internet other than the same like 3 things over and over and
So
over.
unfortunately, there's only like 39 letters that exist that were exhibits in a court case. I think most people like when you get a letter saying like, "I know that you're sleeping around," blah blah, like you throw it away. People weren't saving these.
How many of
things.
those letters have you got?
I get no. You know, only get the Mulcahy and Mbang hate mail.
You
But-
get many of those?
We have
do
a
you?
folder.
What we're excited about, and we're not going to talk about our hate mail anymore. But what we're excited about is like we're going to turn our website into probably the #1 destination for Circleville letters. Like we're going to have more. That's our goal than anybody else. And the court records, we got the police reports from wrong accident. I neglected to tell you that the bus driver's husband, was so upset over this whole thing that he went off to confront who he thought the letter writer was, and ended up dead in a single car accident. But he's found with a gun, and the gun had fired 1 shot, and they don't know who he shot at. So there's a lot of weird
irregularities, huh?
weird shit about this case, and so
Go right back to your having on your website. Are you guys gonna have like because I know you have a couple episodes on before the Macron stuff.
yeah.
I'll talk about all of them. But I know I think you said you have some of that stuff on your website with the Macron stuff. But you guys kind of going to keep like kind of like a catalog on your website of like the Macron case, the Circleville letters, like as you go along, so
Yes.
people like because that's a neat idea because we showed some of the stuff on video here, but I think it'd be really neat to kind of have at least in my mind, just take a free idea here. Like a disclaimer before you start, like, hey, this stuff's not like all of the actual articles we're talking about. They're on the website, so that way people can, a lot of people listen to podcasts when they're driving, like you talked about, and that's what I do too. Or like when I'm working on something, I'll throw my earbuds in and just listen to a podcast at like 1.5 times the speed.
Yeah, I do that.
But it'd be really neat to be able to like, hey, article this is on the website, so people can see all the things and all of the information you're talking about. And
That's exactly our plan, and that's kind of like our new philosophy. So, like, let's only take cases that we can be the best at. If this case is a big one because it's kind of worldwide famous, but like my brother said, most of the stuff that we're finding, because we're, when you research, you glean off other people, like it's all the same stuff. So we went down to Circleville and like we hounded people till we found other people that were willing to talk.
Then we were working with a woman that has her own podcast. Her name's Marie Mayhew, and her podcast is
Whatever Remains.
Whatever
podcast.
Remains. And she's out in California, but she had a bunch of stuff on Circleville, and she shared it with us. It's like the spirit of podcasting. We just all share.
right.
And that's how we want to be, because I want the next person that does Circleville to like come to our website and get a bunch of
But
stuff.
we still want to be the best, also.
Yeah.
But we're working really hard. We've
Yeah.
learned a lot of kind of tricks of the trade and different things to do to make a like me and I mean especially Rick just editing all the time.
And that producer that I was talking about from the Macron case, like he called me and he's like, "Hey, I heard that you said on your podcast that like he listens to the show, which is kind of like it blew my head up a little bit. He's like, heard that you were into the Circleville letters. He's like, I'm into the Circleville letters. He's like, let's help each other. So like he sent me people's
there's something going on with
addresses and like we're working back and forth with each other. So like I actually at one point I can't say too much, like one of the major networks, one of the 3-letter initial
Right.
like they let me use their Rolodex to get like everything they had about the case, and I was
BET.
able to go through that and like track down people. So like it's pretty cool. Like the Macron case opened this door where, you know, for whatever reason, like got some favor with these executives over in New York, and they're helping us on the Circleville letter one. So like I think that's something to be excited about and kind of proud
That's
about.
super awesome. That's super exciting. Once again, I'm sitting over here going, "Why the fuck are we talking to these guys? Like, I should. How do we do this?" No, that's incredibly exciting. So are you guys going to like release it as a series, or are you going to put it out as you're working on it, or is it just going to be you're going to get it all and kind of this is kind of the nuts and bolts of it? I
Well,
guess,
we already
but-
got a lot of the interviews in the can, if that's the industry term, and we just
you tell me. I don't know.
It sounds cool.
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah.
I'm just a dude in the basement.
That sounds,
doing a
that sounds
podcast.
official. No, our studio is way
Yeah,
less
you know, yours is
impressive than
way
yours.
more professional.
Yeah.
Well, I have cameras on, so I have to make it look like it.
I had to tell my wife, like, get out of bed. I'm having people come over.
That's 100% true.
Sometimes it'll be like 11:30. We're still working. She's like, can I go to bed now? I'm like, no.
It's for the podcast.
But I think what we're going to do is we'll still be working on some of them because the other component of our show that we've kind of learned with the Macron case is that the web sleuth community and people like that like do some additional research and get back to us. So we're going to give them the tools and the stuff that we uncovered and see what they can find. So if, you know, depending on how fertile that ground is that they're digging in, there may be some follow-up episodes about the Circleville letters.
Well, that's not a bad idea either, because I know a lot of times you can set, just from producing the podcast, whatever, you can set it up where, you know, you have, this is series 2, episode such and such. Or, you know, have you thought about what's next after this one? Because you could, theoretically, you could do a couple of those episodes, start on your next project, work on those ones, and then as you get that backfill from people listening, you could have multiple things going at the same time and be able to go back and forth.
Sounds
We're
like it was at
scouting
our
already.
planning meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been foiling like crazy lately, but I haven't found a next case yet.
Yeah. Like, so,
Maybe just you need to go back to the truly weird.
yeah.
Yeah.
We were talking about that today, too.
Right?
But we won't take anything. So, like, there'll be a lot of
Come on
cases.
and talk about aliens.
A lot of cases that look really
Egypt?
interesting that when we FOIA them and we get the results, they are clear suicides.
Yeah.
So we don't
I
want to
thought
do
I had
that.
2 clearly ones, and I don't know, it was suicide. You know, like there was a car fire in outside of Medina County there, and found a body in it. You know, I thought that's got to be. And they
It was
came back and
pulled
they
off
said,
on an oil road.
yeah, like way off the road, couldn't see it from the street, and you know, dead body inside, investigation, and then like a month later they closed it. But I don't know, man. I mean, there wasn't anybody saying foul play. I mean, family members, interviews and stuff. I mean,
It's a
it all
rough
came
way to
back.
go, though. If you're going to
It's
choose
crazy
your
that you just
suicide.
literally-
Yeah, that's actually on a personal note. I had a buddy a couple years after he graduated from high school. He had moved out to Arizona and he passed away because his dad lived out there. And they came out and said that he had committed suicide by taking his dad's car, handcuffing himself to the steering wheel, and lighting it on fire. And it's like,
God.
That's brutal.
yeah, like, man, I know that dude.
Was he
It
like
does-
selling drugs or something? That's like cartel stuff.
Yeah,
Probably.
he was one to know. He was known to get in a little mischief. And my biggest thing was like, I know he had a gun. He had to, because that was just kind of like, it goes back to the macro thing. Like,
Exactly.
if you're able to handle a gun, you're going to commit suicide. Like, come on. Like, it's
Yeah.
just,
Statistically, when you look at the statistics,
Yeah.
firearm suicides account for 40% of all suicides in the country anyway. And then I think the people that aren't using firearms are the ones that don't have them.
I saw something somewhere. I don't know how true this is, but they were saying a lot of questionable looking suicides with gunshots, where there's like more than one shot, comes from people watching Hollywood movies and not really knowing how to kill themselves.
Oh, yeah.
And it takes more than one shot.
I could see that too. Well, the same thing with I've heard the same thing about people trying to slit their wrists
Yeah.
because they don't technically know how veins work and different things.
You just do what you saw on the.
Yeah, you watch this movie and you're like, oh, that's how it works. Like, yeah.
So that I think explains some potential weirdness, but again, going back to the Brian Macron case, it's the flip side. He had access to guns and had guns. Why would you choose stabbing?
Yeah, seems like a rough way to go.
There was like no leading up to Macron either. Like that's the other weird.
That's what
You know
it
what I
sounded
mean?
like. You guys are just thrown into the fire.
It's not like, it's not like he was just like, oh, he was really depressed. He just started a new job. It was Christmas. That's one of his largest month for sales. So I mean, if he was financially in trouble, you would think maybe January, maybe. I mean, if it was like a bust year and you're screwed. But
Well, there was no cry for help either. Like a lot of the cases that we think are interesting that we want to cover turn out to be suicides, and there'll be like prior
There's some
attempts
history there.
and things like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but we are always looking out.
Or
for you.
mental, like hospitalization for mental crisis and things like that. We don't see that in this case. It's a different case, and
I would love to get into like the Tic Tac UFOs and UAP. I know it's been covered to death, but that's just something like
I got one for you.
that seems
Okay.
real.
Ancient history.
Okay.
And ancient civilizations.
Love it.
Like have you heard of like Göbekli Tepe?
Göbekli Tepe, yeah.
And the Sphinx and how the Sphinx has been changed and the water erosion and all that stuff on it.
Yeah, Graham Hancock. I think
Yeah,
I love that
See, this guy knows.
guy. That's my favorite subgenre of Joe Rogan shows. Is that
Graham Hancock, Randall Carlson.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Rest in peace. That guy was great. The big beard guy.
He passed. I didn't know he passed.
Yeah.
When did he?
Probably like 2015, 2014.
so pre-COVID.
No.
Can't blame COVID for that.
You
one.
can't blame COVID, but you can blame the aliens. But yeah, it was.
He died in 20. When did
I
Randall
think so.
Carlson die? I know.
He's the old guy, right?
Yeah, the big guy with the beard.
I'm pretty sure that's the one I think. The Egyptologist.
No, you're thinking of. He's the guy that did Magical Egypt.
Yes, and he was. I mean, he was old in the 80s.
Yes,
Yeah.
he's dead.
But he did die recently.
Yes. I was like Randall Carlson.
Okay,
Oh,
yeah,
no.
good.
No, Randall Carlson is. I gotta figure out who did Magical Egypt. The guy that's the Egypt show that I know it's on the top of my head.
I do love all that stuff.
Because there's Randall Carlson, Graham Hancock, and then the other guy that the Egyptologist worked with. What was his name? Just type in Magical Egypt.
I did.
But while she's doing that, and to tie it back into Circleville, like
Yeah.
so you get to Circleville, and it's called Circleville because back in the day, the settlers came there and they saw like all these mounds and stuff because that's where the mound building Indians were like really active down there, and there was one, and they had like the current Native Americans that were there lead them through there, and they said who built this? Like we don't know. It was here when we got here.
This one was interesting because it was a circular, probably fortified mound with a moat.
With a moat and then with like a big kind of like blockade square. And the Indians that lived there when the settlers came, like they're like, we don't even mess with it there. But the settlers like, oh, let's build a town right on top of
Right.
it. So they built a town, and it was cool. Like originally, the town followed the circle, and almost like a pie had like the intersecting roads, and then they leveled that down and made it just kind of more like a normal town.
The
But
town
like
has been haunted ever
right on
since.
it's right on an Indian graveyard, and because there were graves in the mounds, and then right outside is Chillicothe.
Right.
Where
Have
they
you
had
ever
the
been
huge
there to
mounds.
the Mound City?
It's really cool.
We actually were talked about going down and see the
Crete Serpent Mound.
the Serpent Mound.
Yeah,
this summer.
it's not much.
So
further
that
than
whole
that.
part of the state is inundated with mounds. And like when we were down researching Circleville, we found out that Mound City was only like 20 minutes. Not even 20 minutes.
No, it was like 15. Yeah.
Yeah, so we went down there, and it's really amazing. I mean, like, there's just these tons of these different mounds that nobody can really
It
explain
just blows my
how
mind.
long
'cause,
they've
like,
been there, how they got there.
It's just something creepy to me. Like, you get there from England or whatever, or they, came from New England, and then you meet the people that are living there, and to them, that's ancient to them.
Yeah.
And like these mounds, they weren't like
Well,
you
it
didn't
goes-
throw them up overnight. It was decades long.
Oh yeah, there's so many things back in the history. Like goes back to the beast and the rainforest. They found similar structures like that too.
Yes.
Where they're starting to take lidar and stuff over rainforest and the Amazon because
They s-
there's structures there that we've never realized.
They
that
say
are
the
there.
Amazon was essentially a cultivated garden. and like they were growing these trees that like
Yeah.
you know how, like we come like all these trees are medicinal. That's amazing. It's like well, it's because they planted them. Like
Yeah, there's a
the
lot.
rainforest was a living garden they would use for their pharmacy. Like it was cultivated.
I think that should be your guys' theory.
Yeah,
There you go.
that would be cool.
That's
or like
truly
the
weird.
Plymouth colony, like they came like Providence has given us empty villages full of crops. Like it's amazing. It's like well, it's because your germs killed them all. But that's like why the crops were there. Like I don't think we've ever seen like untouched wilderness. Everywhere you go, there's been someone before you, and
Well, yeah, it's too late now.
you know they find like a Chinese anchor off of like San Francisco, like ancient, and they find Viking evidence in like Minnesota. What were those stones? They found those rune stones.
So
And, like,
those were discredited, but
no, I don't think they were, but yeah, I love stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of history that we don't understand, and when people, the experts, are trying to make sense of things, if they don't understand it, they just
yeah,
push it aside. And they're like, well,
Right.
we can't talk about that. Like I know the one we brought up, Chris Doohan, he was on here. We were talking about the jewelry, for lack of a better term, that was found in that cave over in like Russia or something like that, and it was dated back like 36,000 years, and it was like a gem that had like a hole drilled through it, and it was like a bracelet or like a ring or something
Yeah.
like that, and it was like the oldest like piece of jewelry ever found. Well, how did they get a perfect circle through this gemstone 36,000 years ago when even the pyramids were only supposed to be built, what, 8,000 years or something?
and how do
Come on.
they have the
Right.
technology they could cut through
What
the
kind of
stone,
stone were they using? Yeah, like
Right.
But when you think about it, like here in Ohio, like we may be living on one of the meccas of Native American high culture with the Hopewell Indian Mounds. I mean, like the Mound City that we were talking about, they discover shark's teeth from the Gulf of Mexico, copper from like northern Michigan. There's grizzly bear claws that are dug up from there that come from west. So like, you know,
trading post.
it was something that caused
International.
people from all over the country that whatever, to come there.
Well, you figure out the lakes and the rivers that go through there. That's right. Pittsburgh has all those lakes that come, or the rivers that go
Yeah.
through there. And there's people like it's the United States, the area that is now the United States. The Native Americans weren't the first people here, and there's been some kind of cataclysmic thing that happened that they were just the people that survived that.
I love that idea because
Like,
why does history like seems like it just started like at that point, right? Because maybe like there was a great cataclysm that wiped out because the Graham Hancock, I love that guy. He talks about stuff like that. Like maybe Atlantis was just displaced advanced society trying to team up with
maybe
some
it was
nomads.
it was never underwater until it was.
Yeah.
Until that we came out of the ice age and the water rose, and now it just happens to be
Yeah,
underwater.
and the story
Like-
and we can't go back. It became overnight it got flooded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you lose, I don't know how many gallons of water it would take to raise the sea level, 100 or 300,000 feet, whatever it is. But
Ask Greta Thunberg. She'll tell you.
But yeah, but you keep telling the same stories over and over again, and they pass down generations and just get changed a little bit. Like we definitely tell at least pre-mini ice age stories, like the Bible stories.
yeah. I think that's interesting too, is, I've heard a lot of people, it's funny. I grew up extremely like religious. There's a time period in my life. And then growing up in that atmosphere, I don't know what you guys' religious, thoughts
I
are.
definitely have a Christian background.
But if you grow up in that Christian background, you're taught as a kid that these are the infallible, perfect words. Well, then, and when people say, well, that's a lot of words written by a lot of people from a long, long time ago, and your first instinct is to go, well, no, like that's what it is. Well, it's like, well, maybe that is the story they were telling, but you have to consider, through your guys' experience doing what you're doing, having discussions with people, you can attempt to have the same discussion tomorrow. It's going to change a little bit.
This is something that I talk about with my wife a lot about, because she'll be looking at the Brian Macron page and who said what and question me, ask all these questions and stuff like that. And contemporaneous accounts I think are usually pretty valid. Now you have to determine motive. So like the angry resident, like who's telling us the story about the angry resident? Who do we have on record that's mentioned it? So like we could look at motive, but for the most part, you know, like the whole idea of the telephone game that we play with kids, like there's certain handicaps that are built into that game that are designed to create a higher level of misinformation. Where I generally believe, I guess, contemporaneous accounts from people, unless I have something to tell me that this person has an ulterior motive or that I shouldn't listen to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, I think I guess my point in saying that was, excuse me, that not to, when you hear a story, third party or secondhand or whatever the right terminology is to automatically disbelieve it, but it's to understand that, okay, they had an experience and now they are telling you about that experience. And typically, even if it's not important, or not necessarily important, but not, story changing, their experience isn't conveyed exactly how they had it.
Exactly.
And then when you hear it,
Yeah.
like you are taking their story and applying it on your filter.
It's like you said, a quantum thing. If you observing it changes it, the person hearing it, they color it with their own experience and
Yeah,
everything.
and
they've
it's
heard.
not. There's no malice or ill intent on either
No,
side.
I mean, I
you know
think
what I
that
mean?
the
But
three
it's,
of us-
it happens to understand that it happens.
The three of us are going to go home to our three separate households, and all three of our wives are going to ask about how this went. And so we're going to do a different job of explaining how we felt the interview went, or how our impressions of this studio, or what you guys are. And I don't think any one of them would be untrue. You just like, you'll hear
Right, yeah.
my brother mention this picture with the Indian holding the ayahuasca or whatever behind him, and he's going to tell his wife that, but I may not mention that. And then would that make my statement or his statement untrue? No. It just would make it different.
And then if you put the three of them in a room together without you guys there and discussing those conversations, like,
We will not be doing that.
well, but it'd be an interesting experiment. That's what I'm
But
talking
would
about.
they keep the gist of the story? Was the main point of the story that they would gather and they would be able to retell that three guys went down to Chronic Curiosity podcast and did an interview and had a good time? If that's all that they can remember, then that would probably be the ultimate truth that you could glean from
Yeah,
that scenario.
and I guess that's the point.
And
is
that
like how-
becomes a fable. It has an ultimate truth, but you don't actually have to believe all the details.
Yeah, and I think another point of that too is, when someone hears that story that those three guys went to this podcast and had a good time, and it's, as long as that's all they got, that's great. You know what I mean? Because they got the gist of it. But when people try to fill in these details, you have to. The communication is a weird thing, because we're not, now, especially nowadays, where we can see the disparity between taking a video with audio and being able to replay it all, and versus somebody retelling it.
We know a lot about witness statements nowadays.
I bet.
So this is a conversation that I actually had with my wife like this very day. So to me, this is very interesting. Is that she's like, well, how can we believe what these trustees are saying, or what this person said, or what this person said? And I'm like, you can get into the point where you can demand only absolute audio recording, documented truth, but it's a danger there, because then you'll never be able to believe anything. I mean, there's quite a bit of history that you take for granted, like the fact that Julius Caesar existed. Like, you just believe it because his image is on coins. I mean, like any books like Caesar in Gaul, which is attributed to Julius Caesar, and we believe he wrote it. Right. The first evidence of it being published was almost like 600 or 700 years after his death. But almost any historian will tell you that Julius Caesar could be attributed to writing that. It's just like there's a certain danger at a certain point when you demand the most highest levels. And I'm not talking in a biblical sense or anything other than like Macron is a perfect case we can put this onto. It's that there's a certain point where you have to be able to accept contemporaneous accounts that were not recorded if the witness is credible. I mean,
And we're
that's
just a
that's what the
podcast.
courts operate on.
Like, we're not trying to operate in the court. We're just telling a story.
Right. Well, I think it kind of goes to, I have the discussion with my 9-year-old quite often, where she says, well, I know that this, that, whatever. I said, well, and to going what you're saying, I don't need to know all these things are true, to believe. Believe and know are very, very different words. And so it's, you know, if you know something, to me, you had to almost experience it yourself. You had to be there. You had to see it. You had to hear it. And even then, you know, through, you know, a lot of times through witness accounts, your memory can be distorted from what you actually remember. But to say, I know this, I joke with Tony all the time, like the whole flat earth thing. I don't know that the earth is round or globe. I don't, because I've never seen it. Like, I've never been to space.
Yeah.
I believe that, but
It depends on how you define know. So you have to actually see something to know it. So how do you know you love your daughter?
well, I'm saying as a substantial, like,
That's
because I'm experiencing
what I'm talking about. And then you could take it to the point where it's annoying. It's like, well, you went to space and the Earth looked round, but are you an ocular scientist? Do you not know? Can you prove that, like, seeing something from a distance won't cause the curve of your eye to impose a curve on what you're seeing? Like, and you could be so
You bring
annoying
up
to that
flat
point
earth
where, like,
stuff.
all facts become unknowable.
Well, you know, no, I totally get what you're saying, but I just mean just
Yeah, that's the number one definition. You can know through observation, inquiry, or information.
right. But
So I go the information route.
yeah, and I totally get that. I guess my point.
I choose information.
I like
Yeah.
facts.
I do too.
Yeah.
But my point to all that is
But direct
Wait.
experience could be misleading as well.
absolutely. But in my experience, I know people can tend to be more misleading than my own experiences. Just taking it for what it's worth, or their account, or reading a book. You know, you kind of talked about, you know, the media, you know, the narratives. Well, I can go on any news site or social media page or read someone's book. I mean, they have this published book, and I have bought and published books that I disagree with, that I don't think the same thing they did. But it's just because somebody's saying something and it's information and say, this is why, these are the facts. You know, I think it's important to look at it and go, okay, can I prove myself wrong? Can I prove this idea wrong? Even if I can believe it, even if I believe it's true, can I prove it wrong? You know, or can I prove it right? So, like, it's that whole science, you know, theology battle there, where it's like, well, to your point, you could go down a road where you just become annoying. Like,
Or you just could reject anything that you didn't witness firsthand,
Yeah.
which would definitely hamper you as a human, because you have a very limited view of the Earth and a very limited timeline that you've existed on the
Absolutely.
Earth.
yeah, I just use that as an example of, I don't know, I've never orbited the Earth before, so all I see is from my 2 feet standing on this ground. I've flown in a plane a couple times. I've been in a helicopter up real high, but not technically high enough to see the curvature of the Earth, you know, by the whatever.
Right. How do you know you're not the only sentient person in the world? And we're all just here to amuse you.
Yeah.
But
You
know
told
what?
you
That-
told him to say that.
that
didn't
I
you?
did not. I
You
did
son
not.
of a bitch, Tony.
I did not.
Yeah, I'll like every once in a while I send him Tony text or whatever, and then like it'll be a little while. He's like, sorry, had to jump out. I'm back in my avatar now. You son of a bitch. Yeah. I guess I say all that to say
That
I
raises
like-
the point of conspiracy.
I
again,
like
though,
to
too.
stay chronically curious.
There you go. That's a wrap.
You know? Right.
The titular line.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. Oh man. Oh, that's
Because the flat Earth thing, like, you know, I've heard people talk to me about that before, and I'm just thinking, like, so everyone that is involved in satellite technology, every airplane pilot, like anyone that charts any kind of course in the world would have to be in on this conspiracy, and that to me is like the main evidence that you have that it can't stand it. And the same thing
spending
with
too
the
much
Brian
time on
Macron
it.
case. So like we'll get into it where certain people that we like and we talk to believe that like almost everyone that isn't them in this podcast are
Yeah.
part of the conspiracy. I'm like, no, that's insane. Like the more people you add to conspiracy, the less likely
Right.
it is
Absolutely,
to
yeah.
be true, or at least be able to survive any type of scrutiny.
right. It's like the government. Like, do you think the government could cover up all these things? Like, well, no, I think the government's way too stupid to do that.
I don't think the government can build a highway.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but at the same time, is it possible for a small group inside the government to be able to do those things? Maybe. I don't know.
Say 3 people can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead.
So, like, I think the Whitewater scandal is one of the best cases to look at conspiracy, where there's like 3 people that knew, and 2 of them were lawyers, and 1 was the president, and they could have kept it in that office. and they folded under pressure.
Yeah.
They couldn't. I mean, like 3 people was almost too
So
much
yeah.
to keep a conspiracy.
It's hard to believe that there's a 15-person conspiracy in Lafayette Township.
Though what I do sometimes play around with is the fact that there's a lot of moving parts, and on the periphery of the case, there may be something shady here. Please don't look over here, and over here you shouldn't be looking at. And so you see all these things start moving in the background that may look connected, but they may be covering other things, and they are overlapping, and sometimes coming in and obstructing the view, and then sometimes going out.
Yeah, and sometimes that doesn't always have to be intentional either.
Right.
You know, sometimes it just happens.
I'm just a big fan of cutting through kind of all the BS to or with Circleville, Mary Gillespie's husband gets a call and he thinks it's the writer and he leaves his house and he ends up dead, and they say blood alcohol 1.5 times the limit. He had a gun with him, a bullet was fired, but it's just an accident and probably unrelated to the Circleville writer. It's could be, but how many coincidences are going to happen? You know, or how many weird credit card or weird websites does Brian Mack have to visit before it's okay, that might be connected? Why? You know, it's usually the simplest answer is, what's the weird thing that you're involved in, or who's the person you're fighting with?
Yeah, well, they said the simplest answer is usually the best one, or the
law of parsimony.
Yeah, that. And,
Occam's razor.
And that, and was it? Real life is often weirder than fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, it's kind of dichotomy, right?
Yeah, but I mean, how far are you willing to go with Occam's razor? Because I think that would almost rule out extraterrestrial life and definitely rule out multiple worlds theory.
Well, no, there's the what is the?
Well, explain. I've heard that, and as curious as I am, I've never actually.
There's the
dove into
Drake.
Occam's razor.
It's called the Drake equation. Real quick, the Drake equation says
We got all day.
with as fast as the universe is, and with all the planets and all the chances for life, it's more unlikely for us to be alone than for there to be other people. So that goes along with Occam's razor, which is the simplest explanation tends to be true. Oh. So it's more believable on a grand scale that we're not alone in the universe. But obviously, so far, and there's a whole that would be a good episode, because there's a whole bunch of different things where they think that either there's an advanced civilization that keeps stopping us from reaching the next level because they're not ready for us to be revealed.
So my brother and I generally disagree on things.
Everything.
Yeah, a lot of stuff.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, makes it fun.
It's so fun.
We have teams.
So
Yeah, there it is right there, the Drake equation.
Okay, so it's just basically it's putting a math equation to all of the theoretical possibilities of.
And he's the guy that chose the inputs, so it's based on his choices, but it makes sense. Number of civilizations, rate of formation of stars, fraction with planetary systems, planets suitable for life. And again, that's based off of suitable as in related, Earth-like. And even with all that,
And I think there's another problem with that, though, that we consider, you know, I know this is not original. I don't know where I got it from once again, but you know, we look at the Goldilocks zone as for when we're looking for life on other planets. We go, well, it has to have, you know, a carbon-based system, and it has to have this atmosphere and oxygen. Well, it doesn't. Just because we exist this way,
yeah,
you know, we don't. And there's even evidence that it doesn't have to be that way,
No.
because there's things that live down in the very, very depths of the ocean that never see sunlight, that never see oxygen.
thermal vents, those worms. Yep.
So then, do you believe any of the people that have claimed to have witnessed extraterrestrial life? Because they always describe them as somehow humanoid, or the most off from humanoid, they would describe them as reptilian.
You're using a lot of always and only.
Well,
I don't think so.
I can't
See,
think
I
of
fall
one.
somewhere in the middle, you know?
Maybe that's where you fit in, right? You're like,
you
come on,
got the
guys.
great-
It's I don't know.
You got the reptilians. I mean, they're always described.
I mean, there's
that
a-
I can think of
a
in
multitude.
humanoid.
Reptilian, we don't need to get QAnon on this.
I passed the QAnon house on the way here.
What do you mean, you a QAnon house?
Yeah, the big WG1A or whatever.
Yeah, where we go one, we go all.
Yeah, I don't know. I stopped myself from reading the whole sign. I didn't want to go crazy.
Well, I think there's a problem with the. Well, there's a problem with a lot of things. I just lost what I was going to say. Well, the whole theory of other beings and all that. Oh man, I wish there was something. Oh, that's what it was. So, people describe, their extraterrestrial interactions to be very similar. And we think about these beings as, being humanoid. I think, and we're going way off the rails here. I told you, you go whatever. We do whatever. Maybe if we had the capabilities of sending things to other planets, what would we do? Well, we'd send satellites first to check it out, and then we'd send rovers, right? So we'd send bots. So maybe these things aren't humanoids. Maybe they're just, if this species are intelligent enough, they go, okay, well, let's create basically a drone or just
The
this.
Greys are drones. That's the theory.
Like this fake thing it's a drone, and we send these little humanoid things. So when people do see it or something like that, they can kind of. Who was that guy? Is it Travis?
Travis Bickle, I think.
No,
from
the guy that
from the
was,
band.
No.
Oh, okay,
I'm talking about the guy that one of the most famous abduction stories. Rogan had him on a little while ago.
Oh no.
Was it Travis? It was Travis something.
Yeah, it was Travis.
He was he was a logger out west somewhere, and him and the guy, they got done working. They jumped in the truck, and as they were leaving, they saw this UFO. He jumped out, and supposedly
Walton.
Travis Walton. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know that.
Oh yeah, check it out. I don't know. It's Rogan just had him on. Really
Okay.
interesting. It's one of the and there's a movie that was made about him back in like the 80s or 90s.
Yeah.
Oh,
saw that
Fire in the
movie.
Sky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I do know
Fire in
that
the
one.
Sky.
Never
Yeah.
mind.
So Rogan just talked to that guy.
Sweet. I didn't. Who knew he was alive?
Yeah, he has a great mustache too.
Wow.
It's a phenomenal mustache. It's even better than Tony's.
Really? I don't know.
Oh no, he has like a Tom Selleck kind of mustache.
Oh yeah, those are coming back. Mustaches are coming back.
I can't grow a mustache. Yeah, it's all right. But he talked
He does
about.
so good. Yeah.
So much better than
Oh, that's a tiny. That's not a very good picture of him.
It's the first one that came out.
I'll keep my beard.
I didn't say.
I'll be registered on
I
some
didn't say
sex
his-
offender websites if I look like that.
I didn't say his face is great. I said he had a really nice mustache.
Yeah, that's a womb broom if I've ever seen one.
Yeah. But he was talking about at one point, like when he was interacting with these beings, that they were like the stereotypical gray, like, big, smooth bodied, big heads, little tiny bodies, whatever. But then like he started freaking out and they all like left. And the next thing you know, some like very human like person looking came in.
Have you heard about that former Israeli government guy that said
He said, yeah,
they look like us,
they're here. They're just waiting for us to get our shit together.
and that we work with them, that we're currently working with them on Mars?
I didn't hear him
That's
say
what
that.
he said. Yeah, and that they look just like us.
Oh, I mean, I've thrown out the idea that Elon Musk has been an alien for a long time.
He looks like an alien.
He looks like a good alien though. He's not nearly as bad as like Zuckerberg.
Yes, I agree with that.
No. So no, Zuckerberg, that's a drone. That's for sure.
That's
a
what
drone.
What about Bill Gates? Bill Gates is an
Yeah.
evil alien.
Yeah, well,
I think
Oh.
Elon Musk is on our side.
Yeah, I think
Our side.
I think we had the conversation.
The side of the people, humanity.
Yeah, he's a great troll. We had this conversation.
Yeah.
Bill Gates wants to block out the sun, so we can't let him do that.
Bill Gates is weird.
I'm not on for the crazy.
And then, like, when we were going down to Florida, like, we always go to the Florida Keys, and, like, I picked up the paper down there, and I'm, like, showing my wife, like, oh, look, Bill Gates wants to release millions of genetically modified mosquitoes. I'm like, what doesn't make him sound like a supervillain at this point?
Yeah, and
Well,
like,
what doesn't make Elon Musk sound like a
He
villain?
doesn't want to release genetically modified mosquitoes
Do you know what they're gonna do
or
with those
block out the
mosquitoes,
sun.
Block out the sun. That's insane. You have to show me that. The mosquito thing is to make them. They would like mate and then kill out the line.
And
of
what could go
mosquitoes.
wrong?
Right. No, I'm not
What
for
could
that.
go wrong?
I just can't get on your Facebook page conspiracies.
yeah. Well, and at the same time, like,
Now you and the Beacon Journal.
well, the whole like Bill Gates, like, since when does just a I'm not saying he's not smart. I'm not saying he's not whatever, but since when does a software like developer and creator like become this
Amen.
world-renowned like leader in person that we should all listen to?
Especially a
Save in
software that's
Africa.
riddled with viruses.
Yeah, like,
You know, like, I mean, they can't even lock down your software. Like, there's just another Windows backdoor that I just heard about on the radio yesterday.
yeah. No one's talking about that. No one's
He
talking about that
hasn't worked at
Microsoft.
Microsoft for years.
Yeah, but that's what I'm
You
saying.
would think if you're so freaking brilliant, like, I would have, like, hey guys.
There's a lot of not freaking brilliant people we listen to all the time.
Right. No,
I'm
I
just
get
saying,
it.
Look at all our
What kind of
politicians.
battles are we picking here?
That's the whole
least
point.
he-
Like,
yeah.
why are we listening to these people all the time? Like, just because of the experts?
That's the other thing that we were talking about fallacies and thinking as appeal to authority as another fallacy. And like we run into that when we were talking before about like back the blue or don't back the blue. Like, no, use your judgment, look at where things are going and how they're acting. So you don't make like this binary decision that anyone with a badge automatically will back.
Yeah, I
or
like what
anyone
you
without
said.
a badge, I automatically think that they're lying. Like you have to make your own decisions.
I think
or
people are
vice
doing their
versa.
jobs with the tax dollars we give them. Like, it
Yeah.
shouldn't have to be like an emotional thing. Like,
Right.
you do your job, I'll do my job.
Yeah. Well, I think people want to live in this black and white.
But I mean, like in the appeal to authority goes further. Like when we were talking about, like, would you know that the Earth wasn't flat, even if your eyes were maybe playing tricks on you, so it appeared to be curved from space capsule? Like, that's the appeal to authority, where like
a lot of people need to like
you talk yourself
freshman
out of being able to believe
philosophy
direct
class.
experiences.
Just get it out of your system. Just do Plato, do all the stupid navel gazing stuff.
Hey, babe, I fucked something up.
What'd you do?
I don't know. You just
What do
need
you
to
mean?
rearrange.
What'd you do?
Probably wrap it up, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, we can if you guys got to get going. We can.
I just minimized it.
Oh dear. Yeah, we can wrap things up. You guys get going.
though.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
This is fun.
Yeah, like I said, I got all day. I mean, I got all day and about 6 bottles of liquor. We can do it.
I got about 10 more in the vehicle too. So
Yeah, we could do it. Oh yeah, we can wrap it up if you guys want to get going. So invisibleshipspodcast.com. It's just invisibleshipspodcast.com, right?
Yep.
You guys check it out on there. You're on all of the things.
Yeah,
Pretty much anywhere you can get a podcast.
Yeah. And man, I really appreciate you guys coming on.
dude, this has been fun.
Yeah.
You know, it's cool to be here on Chronic Curiosity. Like, I've listened to you guys on my drive to and from work, so it's just cool seeing you guys and interacting. And I always wanted to be in this studio. Now I'm here.
Yeah, it's
And
cool.
it's very
It is.
exciting.
No,
I
you-
say always. That makes it sound like
Always since
He's a
I
long
found you
time-
on Instagram.
Long time fan, first time caller.
Yeah.
yeah. Right. Well, I appreciate
Thanks
it.
for putting up with our craziness.
Oh,
You know,
appreciate
Like,
you guys coming on. It means a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. Well, next time, let us know what you got going on, and we'll stay in touch and do this again.
All right.
Thank you guys.
Yes,
Beautiful.
thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good one.
Thanks for the beer.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the drink.